Awesome. Well, we already dived into a lot of things off air, so I had to pause us. I had to hit the record button real quick because we started to journey off in our tangents, which I'm absolutely loving already. But brother, why don't you introduce yourself for people watching, listening, so yeah, they can know a little bit about you and who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, kia ora, folks. I'm I'm Netic. I'm Netic Rebel. My name is something that sort of the people had given to me, friends and family. Kien Ilan is my actual name. Kien means the ancient one. Ilan means the tree of life. Really, very few people use it. Very few people even know that that's, you know, my name. But I think it's important that I start sharing that part of me, because right now we're getting into a space where I feel like everybody has so many, like, they have these avatars that they pull out into the world, and you know, that's what gets presented and pushed forward, and sometimes, you know, the depth of the person gets lost in it. So I want to honor my ancestors and whoever sung that song into my mom's ear to name me Kien. I want to honor that, you know. So what's up?
Awesome. And look, it's probably good that I introduced myself to you as well, I guess, sort of formally,
Yeah,
because this is actually the first time that we've met. We've had some loose conversations through the DMs on Instagram, but nothing too elaborate. We wanted to wait until we could get in front of each other to actually get into it. So kia ora, bro. My name is officially, according to the mother in my government, is Hohepa Rewati Timoana, but everyone just calls me Heps. But I totally vibe you on the getting back to, you know, kind of what you've been called, or acknowledging that side of yourself as well. You know, you say avatars. I think I've been using the word masks, but yeah, there's all sorts of places and ways we can go with that, which no doubt we'll touch on throughout our conversation. But cool to meet you face to face, brother, and get some time in with you. Thank you for making the time.
Oh, it's amazing. It's just, I was actually, you know, obviously on your gram and just floating around, and was like, you know what, this would be a really interesting brother to speak to, you know. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk and build with the community there, share whatever I've got to share, and take whatever you've got to share, and hopefully, you know, build more bridges.
But we started getting into it a little bit, bro, like I guess off air, before I got a chance to hit the button, we got carried away. Can you tell us about your connection to New Zealand? I'm interested to know how that all came to be and where that lies.
So interestingly enough, I think it's a very, so I've had this really deep feeling and yearning that I've always felt towards anytime that I've witnessed a haka anywhere. It was like this chills and resonant, like my I would just start crying. And I was never really, like, I didn't even know necessarily where they were like, where it was from, or, you know, and I'm talking about before YouTube, before just like, if I, you know, when I would see it in like the Olympics or All Blacks or anything, I would just be like really like taken aback. And my mom was the same. My brother, obviously YouTube was amazing, because I would just watch hours of hakas, like what is this, and why is it speaking to me in this way? But you know, just watching, paying attention. I think all of Native peoples have this connection where we feel each other when we're in our when we're in our prayer, when we're in our spirit, when we're in our honoring of our ancestry. I think we all can connect and feel that, you know, that resonant frequency. We're like, yeah, that feels familiar. But I will say something about that haka energy has always resonated very, very strongly with me and my brother. And we always tease each other about like having, just like, we come from a warrior tribe, like a warrior spirit. And it's very, very much true to who we are, you know. We look at things from that space as well, you know, and recognize that, you know, sometimes there's a need for the war council, and sometimes there's a need for the war council to sit down and listen to the elder, you know, but listen to the elders and have the matriarch take over. But ultimately, you know, just really, really tuning in. And my brother said something to me a few years back, and he said, I think what it is that we deeply respect about the Polynesian, Maori, Samoan, just cultures, and Polynesian culture in general, I have a lot of love for the Polynesians in my life, is that there's really very little false bravado that comes across to us. I think that there's a true sense of understanding your power and your strength.
Yeah.
Just in general, just in physical size alone, you know, just being like, we don't really have to act tough. We're clearly tough, you know. We're clearly built for wherever you want to take this. We're clearly built for it. So there's an opportunity in that alone to be silly and loving and sing-songy and dancing and celebrate these aspects of masculinity that aren't necessarily always celebrated, particularly in American culture and American indigenous cultures. We have our dances, and I'm talking about indigenous African American cultures to indigenous Native American cultures. We have that, but we live in a place where literally we're still under like occupational attack, you know, from the system. So we're still like in war paint, you know, and we're still very much like forced into communities that are, you know, deeply depressed, deeply economically depressed, deeply spiritually depressed. You know, we still are living you know, we're still on the res, you know, for all intents purposes, and forced reservations. So a lot of times we're carrying a lot of bravado. We're carrying a lot of like, we still have our armor on, we still have our shields up, we still have our knives close. And in America, knives are guns for real, you know, like we really keep those close to us. We keep that warrior aspect of us is still very much in us, you know, and we carry it close to the chest and close to the heart. And we're still protecting ourselves in a way that hasn't really allowed us to strip a lot of that armor off and be a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more silly. You know, we're silly, but it's still, even our silliness is still a very aggressive, you know, it's very masculine. And, you know, I want to be mindful about how I describe masculinity, because I think that the spectrum of masculinity is very, very wide, but it's still very hyper aggressive in its masculinity. So, you know, and I really appreciated something about the Polynesian and the Samoan, the Maori cultures that I saw. They were very loving and tender, and would definitely chop you up if it was a problem, but also would like deep hugs and, you know, and admirations and love and respect, you know, for their family and community. And that was something that my brother had noticed. He was like, I think it's because they're silly, like we're silly, and it comes from a confidence of their ability to execute violence if they need to. And he was like, but when you don't need to carry that. And you don't need to, you know, like you don't need to carry your sword always out of its sheath. And so I thought that was really like a beautiful articulation of what he had observed and why we felt this strong connection. Fast forward, I see this dude on Instagram, Jordan, and I don't even know how I came across him. He was doing something like he made like the Drake video, and it was hilarious. Like he was like outside the car trying to get his boy to do and I just was like, yo, this guy he's like me and my brother. Like there's something about him that just felt so familiar. He's got, you know, thousands of Instagram followers or whatever, but there was something about him that was like, yo, this dude is my family. Like I know this guy, I know this person, I know his spirit. Something about him is resonating super strong with me. And I like reposted a bunch of his stuff, and then he did like a follow-up video, because that video went viral, and he did like a follow-up video. He was like, well, since I got you guys here, I might as well show off some of my kicks. And he did like a whole video where he was doing like ridiculous karate kicks. And he like did a jump kick and hit his head on the ceiling. And he was like, doesn't affect me at all. And I remember thinking, yo, this dude is me and my brother. What is going on here? Like he's my brother. Why is he feeling so like close to me? And I reached out, and it was like instantaneous. Like I just said, like, listen, it's gonna sound super weird, but for whatever reason, man, I'm like, I don't even know how it came about, but basically I was just like very clear and transparent about it. Like, bro, you're my brother, man. Like, I don't know where, I don't know if in what lifetime, I don't know through what spirit ancestors, how this came to be, but I know you. Like, I deeply know your spirit. And we followed up, we talked, we talked like a lot all the time. Like, and then it was just like very, very clear that I was something, I came at the exact time that he needed me to come. Pause. We play a pause game in America, so I got to throw that in very quickly. But I came to him at a time that he needed me to come to him, and it was very clear that he came into my life in a way that I needed him to come into my life and our life and my family's, and we just literally just merged families like very, very quickly. And we were like, listen, we got to get the tribes together. We got to get the families together. And we're like, we're going to come to New Zealand. And my family, all 17 of us, like 17 of my brother brought 17 of us went to New Zealand, my family, to really bridge that gap and show that it wasn't just talk. Like, it was real, this thing that we feel is very real. So that's the story in a nutshell. And it was just been a very beautiful sort of bridge that has been built between my family here and I'm technically in Mexico, but my family in the States and my family in New Zealand, the opportunity to build that. So I'm very, very grateful to my brothers and my sisters in New Zealand for keeping your spirit intact and keeping your culture strong and your language strong, because it really is an inspiration to so many of us natives who are still wearing our war paint and still carrying our shields and our bow and arrows and our spears and tomahawks,
Crazy. I want to ask, because there's a lot to unpack there. There's different things that are popping up that I'm trying to make mental notes of to come back to. But to have, I guess, the confidence or that innate kind of ability to just reach out to someone, like at the time, a random on Instagram, and say, hey, brother, I don't know what it is, but me and you connected, we're family. What has gone on in your life to lead up to the point where you're comfortable doing that sort of thing? Because there must have been a lot of shit to go down to get to that point, right? Or nah, you're comfortable doing
I want to honor, I feel like it's a very cyclical thing. It's a really good question. And I have to honor my spirit and wherever I came from. It's been in me since I was a very young child. I will walk up to strangers and talk to them since I was a kid. My mom would always say, like we have to be mindful. Like, you literally will go somewhere, like go off with a stranger. But I've always been that way. My mom used to give me and my brother, like, she would give us like $20, and she'd say, listen, there's $10 between the two of you. If you want something, you guys got to figure it out, split it up. And I would always want something that was probably more expensive. My brother would want something that was more expensive. And I was very quick to like just start negotiating. Like, listen, we've only got $20. My mom gave it to us. We're trying to, we want to buy 2 t-shirts, but like, it was very much part of my spirit to do that. My mom and my dad both acknowledged that. They're like, yo, you've always been like that. But I think over time, because I was comfortable with that, I've become more and more, just like anything, like anything that you use and you practice, you get better at and you get stronger at, and that muscle gets stronger. And you also start to put away the fear of rejection, because that's really all that we're scared of. We're scared of being rejected in some way, shape, or form, you know, and not being seen for our true self, or seen for our intentions, or seen for our good nature. We're, you know, so, you know, we sometimes we pack and hide it away and actually protect it with bad actions before someone can even, you know, pierce it and make us vulnerable. We're like, well, you know, F that, I'm gonna put the wall up and I'm gonna, you know, box it in and be an asshole. And it's like, bro, you don't gotta do any of that. Like, we're good, we see you. So I think that there's been a lot of things on my journey that have allowed me to continue to be in alignment with myself in a particular way. I have to say, it's almost like I've had a cheat code in a lot of it, because I was the lead singer of a band for a very long time. And particularly with music, when you're on stage and you're saying, you're saying your thoughts out loud, you know, you're singing your songs, and these songs are reflections of your internal thoughts that you've written out and you sung them, and then people are singing them back. That's a positive feedback loop that you're kind of caught in. And you do begin to buy into your own, could be bullshit, could be like truth and power and strength. It depends on, you know, what stories you're telling. But you know, and for the 12 to 13, 14 years I was in, you know, this band, and, you know, singing to thousands and thousands of people, and then having them sing back, and, you know, it's almost like they give you a chance to truly be yourself. And you don't have to really, I was being positively reinforced at being myself. And even if it's not even necessarily real, because it's a fan base giving it back to you, there is something that's resonating with them, that's, you know, being fed back to you. So it's an opportunity to get that muscle stronger, where you're like, no, I'll stand in my truth. People listen to me. They like me. They, you know, like they sing my songs back. They, you know, hang the poster on the wall, or whatever the case is. And that's that also helps you work out that muscle, where you're kind of like, it's cool, bro. Like, I'm gonna say what I think and say what I feel, and I know that there are people out there that it'll resonate with, and I'm really big on that. I'm trying to be really big on staying in my truth, and staying in on my path, and being radically honest to the best of my ability with myself. And sometimes that means, you know, having to unpack something that I thought was a truth, and then realizing, like, you know what, actually, you don't really even care about, like, you don't even feel that way anymore about this, you know, like so sometimes, you know, truth is a very interesting thing when you're talking about personal truths, because sometimes they bend and they shift, and you have to like unpack that. And, you know, something that you felt was true to you on Wednesday turns out by Thursday night, you're like, actually, I don't really know if I believe that anymore. You know, so I think that when we get into this space where we're really allowed to be ourselves out loud unapologetically, we do push a lot of people away. But what we find is that, you know, a lot of the people that we were pushing away were only around because we weren't really giving them who we were to begin with. You know, we were putting up that mask that you were talking about.
So you come back to those truths, right? You're giving out, let's just call it a false truth, for lack of a better term right now. So that's the people you attract, the people who are aligned to that false truth. That's who you have around. And yeah, I suppose for me, I know in those times when people have left my life, or when they're departing, it's a reality. It's an actual manifestation of me shifting. And that sometimes is the hard part. I'm like, okay, these people are leaving me. And yeah, that's hard, because that's my friend I've known for, you know, we quite often put time on it. That's a friend I've had for 5 years. So that means they should mean 5 years to me, you know? So like when I see them going, but then I think what the actual kind of heartbreaker or the tough paid thing is sometimes is that it's a recognition that I'm actually changing. And that's the tough part, I think, more often than not.
No, that's real. I think also, it's like, I think about this, when if I have 200 friends that are only, you know, that are only giving me 2% of themselves, and I have 5 friends that are giving me 100% of themselves, obviously I'd rather have the 5 friends, right? So if I lose 200 friends because they weren't really into it anyway, they weren't really into who I was, it's like I'm going to turn people off. When I want to be so unapologetically myself that I turn a bunch of people off. Like I want to turn them off, but I want to see who I turn on, because now all of those people I turn on are in complete alignment with me, you know, like they really are with me, you know? So for me, it's like, I'm just going to dive in, be who I am, be loud, be wrong sometimes, be loud and wrong sometimes. And, you know, and double back and be like, yo, guess what? That was crazy what I said. Turns out, you know, like to backpedal it and say, turns out that's not true at all, you know, like, but I think that when you're able to do that, people get a chance to see what it's like to live in their truth through you living in your truth. Like, wait, I still like this guy. Even though he was wrong about this and loud about this, and I disagree with that, there's something about him that I still like. So maybe if I'm living in my truth, people will still like me, you know, and you can, and that person, and they can, because they can be, because no one's infallible. Like, I don't know anybody that hasn't, you know, that has figured it out.
Yeah. I was at a course the other weekend, and I'm not claiming this is an original thought or idea. I know I've picked it up somewhere, but it just resonates to what you're saying, is that I said to a couple of the people in the class, because like we're in a classroom, right? And I think people forget this when you're doing a course or whatever, you forget that you're actually there to learn. You kind of feel like you're there to already know, and you can be tough on yourself when you're not clicking to the lesson, or if you're not picking it up as fast as your classmates. You're like, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I don't know this. It's like, well, that's why you're here, to learn, right, to know. But you don't have to know already. And kind of the thought or the message I was getting to is I said to these people in my class is like, you don't have to, yeah, I guess that was it. It's like, we're here to learn. We're not here to know. And that's, but I think do you think it's like it's almost like a societal thing, right? Or like a culture, we've been shaped that you can't be wrong. And that if you are, like, you can't be wrong again? Or what are your thoughts around the whole narrative of, you know, having to be correct all the time?
I mean, that's interesting. I think it ties into the cancel culture, like where we are now in terms of like canceling people because of something that they say that's politically incorrect or uncouth or sexist or racist or, you know, misogynist or any of these things. It's like, wait, if you point me to a person who figured it all out and is perfect, you know, I'll be impressed to hear, you know, that person's take on canceling other people. But the reality is that, like, number one, I don't know anyone like that. I've never met anyone like that. And number two is like, we actually need the push and pull, because good ideas don't happen in a vacuum of one thought. They happen in a vacuum of challenged, you know, and push and
backwards and forth and debate.
Right. Like there has to be a volley in there, and there has to, because that's the only way that you really get strong, right? Like, I mean, say boxing, for example, you know, just like you go to the gym, and at first you don't know where to hold your hands. You don't, you know, you're stiff with your jab. Your head moving is trash. Your feet moving are trash. And it's like, but you need someone to expose you. And the way that they do that is by tapping you every once in a while. Goddamn, I put my hands like, you know, or you leave your jab out too long and the counter comes and you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna pull that back. And those taps are important. That back and forth is important. And, you know, and I use that silly physical example because it's one that you can visualize. Like people always, it's all seen what happens when somebody makes a mistake boxing. But the truth of the matter is that, you know, when we're having a thought or an idea, number one, it's not ours. Like the ideas are, you know, these ideas they are to be exchanged on an open market, right? Of thought. And the goal is to, you know, like stocks. The goal is to drop a shitty idea, you know, fast and get with a good idea quickly, you know? So, but the only way to do that is to have an open exchange of ideas. And if you think that you own an idea, you don't. Number one, all of this stuff is free flowing through you, you know, and something comes to you, guess what? You didn't invent the idea. A bunch of other people had it as well, you know, like, and then maybe you're blessed to be the first one to express it in a way that, you know, a beautiful poem, beautiful book, beautifully said, beautifully written, beautifully sung, you know, beautifully built. Fantastic. That idea, as soon as it resonates with other people, it's out there into the world, and it's going, you know, and it belongs to everyone. And we don't need to hoard those ideas. We don't need to hold them. We don't even need to necessarily protect them. We actually need to put them up on the chopping block and see what comes back intact, because that's how you know you have a good idea. Is if you put something out into the world, and after people chop it up, the core of that idea or the core value of that idea is still intact, and you know you're onto something. But when we're afraid to not have any conversation, or not have conversations, or not let people put ideas out onto the chopping block, and we're quick to peg them as something because of an idea, so you are not your ideas. You aren't your ideas. You are expressing an idea, but you are not your ideas, because if you were, then you'd be whoever you were at 12, still at 30, you know? So it's like you're not. Your ideas are constantly changing, you're evolving, you're growing, and you're the sum of these experiences all the time. But I think, I mean, also, real quick, the only way to be truly open-minded is to not only hear other ideas that challenge yours, but to hear other ideas that challenge yours from the space that they're possibly correct. That's the only way you can have a truly open mind. Because if you shut off a section of ideas, and you're just staying with, you know, something that reinforces your idea, that isn't an open mind. And that's a really bad critical thinker. You're not really a good intellectual thinker or a philosopher or whatever. You're pegging yourself, you're setting yourself up. The best way to really to have an open mind is to be able to not only hear other ideas that contradict yours, but to hear them with an open mind that they might be right, even if it's something that you don't like, which is difficult to do. But when you do it, you start to really expand your ability to critically think, because then there's no black and white. You can see where things live in the gray.
Yeah. So
and they add on to you, you know?
There's a few lanes we can run with this, because you brought up a lot of stuff that I feel is really interesting, and it's a lot of conversations that are happening in my close circles as well. And so you mentioned critical thinking a lot. I feel like we're in a place and time, and we've talked about, you know, the cancel culture stuff, which we'll circle back to as well. But just because you've spoken about critical thinking, it feels like we're in a time where you're not allowed to question anything. Like you've got to go with the narratives, and if you are seen as questioning stuff or having critical thoughts, then you get put with that conspiracy theorist label. That's how I'm seeing it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm a conspiracy theorist, so whatever. Like,
what does that even mean? What does that mean?
I mean, that's the thing. It's like I'm open to wearing that label, because I think that any critical thinker should be a conspiracy theorist. And that doesn't mean that you're like, you know, that it's about aliens or that it's about, but you should, I'm not telling you what conspiracies to buy into, other than the fact that people in power conspire together to maintain power and to grow power. That's not like an unknown fact. That's a fact. That's why that's literally why there's secret agencies that have, you know, secret clearances and top and level clearance levels, or businesses, you know, a business meeting. If anyone that runs a business understands that, is like, what's going on with the owners of the business is different than what's going on with management of the business, which is different than what's going on with employees of the business, which is different than what's going on with who the business is serving and catering to. It's like the person that orders a coffee at the coffee shop is not privy to the conversations of the owners and the franchise owners of that coffee shop. Like, there's people up here doing things differently, conspiring secretly or how, and not even secretly, just there's parties that they're invited to that you're not invited to. So there's conversations that they're having that you're not privy to. And I think that that's a pretty basic space to start from when you're talking about like power. So for me, I'm very comfortable being like, yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist, whatever, like whatever, because I'm going to operate from the place that I think that I understand that power needs to conspire with itself to maintain itself. And it would do so in a fashion that would make it elitist. The second part of your question, I think, is I think that it's what's dangerous is that they've associated critical thought with a negative thing, you know, with being where questioning something is a violation of others' safety, others' rights, others, you know, it's a very strange, and I'm not even being specific with it. It's just that I think that that's a dangerous place for us to get to, where, you know, not being able to say the wrong thing publicly or say the wrong thing privately. If we live in a space where we're not allowed to say the wrong thing, it's like, it's going to be very hard to find out what the right thing is.
Yeah, because there's no, so we talked about before, you need that toing and fro. You need the volley. Volley's the word you used. I like that. You need the volley. You don't get the volley, or you've only got one person hitting, the other person's not volleying back if you've only got that one lane of questioning, right?
Yeah, it's a dangerous space. And I mean, it's weird because we've set ourselves up for it, you know, like especially in America here with Trump, it's like, it's very easy for people to like immediately denigrate somebody to like a Trump supporter if they question anything that's politically left. If they question that, like, what are you, a Trump supporter? And you're like, what? I'm a no one supporter. So now we can start there. Or like, I don't support either one of your favorite candidates. So let's start there. I'm going to start right there, right now. We can give you the ground level. But I've witnessed that happen. Perfect example is what's going on right now with Nicki Minaj. The statement that she made publicly, there was nothing really wrong with that statement. The statement of like, listen, pray, do your own research, make your own come to your own conclusions, but don't feel pressured. Don't feel pressured by anyone else to do something that you're uncertain of with your body. That is a fair, more than fair statement to make about anything, right? Like, I don't care, literally about anything. If you would say that to your daughter about having sex for the first time, or, you know what I'm saying, or the 1,000th time, you would say it to your son about, like, that's a fair statement. And the way that they have switched that narrative because of who came to her support in terms of that statement was like, oh, it's literally about race. Like, oh, the person that backs her on that is a white nationalist. And I've had to like go to people and be like, listen, truth doesn't really care who says it. It doesn't, truth isn't really interested in the same way that the sun isn't interested whether or not the sun doesn't care whether you bask in it or sit in the shade. Doesn't matter. The sun is going to be shining. And like, truth is very much like that sunshine. It's like, you can get with it and a bunch of people are going to agree. And it doesn't matter what those people, who those people are, what their history is. You cannot, that's not the point. The point is there truth in her statement? And right now, I'm like, you're seeing her really be ridiculed, and it's really sad. It's, you know, because we're in this place where you really, not me, because I don't really have nothing to lose. I'm like, I'm like, whatever, you know. But I feel for people who really can't afford to, you know, who can't afford to say what they think out loud. And I have tons of messages from very famous people in my DM saying, yo, I wish that I could talk the way that you talk, you know, like in very different arenas, from sports to entertainment to some politics, but a lot of different people in a vast majority of spaces that are like, I like, keep talking your shit, man. Like you literally are a voice for all of us who can't say the stuff that we want to say. So it's interesting now, for that to be the reality.
So with those people that are messaging you, the sports people and the politicians, etc., how do you empower them? Or do you even empower them? Do you kind of just leave them and that's their thing? But do you have any conversations around why they should or how they can step up and speak their truth? Or do you don't see that as a role to play? You just let it be. It is what it is.
I think the most important thing, well, first of all, I try to stay away from like the should aspect, because I genuinely don't really know people's situations and circumstances to be positioning myself in a space where I can tell someone what they should or shouldn't do. Yeah. Like I don't think that that's fair of me. And that's something I don't really want to do. I think what I try to do is try to let them know that they have more supporters than they think they do, because I say, one of the ways that I usually say this is like, look, you're not the only one that's hitting me. And usually you're not the only one in your respective field. And sometimes I'll ask someone if I can introduce them to someone else who's feeling very similar to them, and, and try to bridge that gap so that they at least have each other's back, because
the community there.
Yeah, because also it's very difficult. They made it very difficult to really, especially when people see what happens and, and your livelihood is potentially on the line, or you witness what these sort of
it's
media castrations,
it's lonely, right? To be contrarian and stand up, it's a lonely journey a lot of the time. From what I understand, obviously I'm not famous myself, but from what I understand, being famous is also a lonely journey. So yeah, that's great that you're creating community between people that cross-section into those.
Yeah, also, and I think, again, I try to really just be it's like I try to be like a beacon for other individuals. So it's like my light, if I'm shining, and I'm just being in my truth and I'm shining and they're witnessing it. And sometimes you feel like a ship lost at sea and you see that light and you kind of come towards it and you're like, oh, okay. Like, wow, you're a wild boy. You really actually said that out loud on Instagram and left it up. Okay. Like, but I think that helps to, I think that helps to empower people to, again, like I said before, when you see somebody living in their truth, and I'm not claiming to have figured, like, I didn't figure this out. It's not something that I'm working at it every single day to figure out what is my truth and how I can live in it, every day. I think people recognize like, yo, this guy, honestly, you know what? Actually, honestly, I know exactly what it is. It just dawned on me. This is really where it first came from. It came from, and I know for men, this is a real thing. It came from, wow, he's a wild boy and girls still like him. That is the actual place that it started, and a very particular type of girl that has a very large following or is famous or is something of this nature. Like it was that. And I know that it was that because I've had friends of mine say like, yo, I found you through when you were dating so-and-so. Like, I couldn't believe that she was dating, and I was like, yo, this guy's actually cool. Like, he's dope. And I know that reinforcement, because at the end of the day, that's really what we're doing here. Like, we're on a physical, tangible level, we're reproducing, and we're putting ourselves out there to be chosen, especially men. And or that's how it normally, we're putting, we're doing our best to compete with each other for the gaze and the eyes of certain women. We want to be picked by these women. And I do think for sure that has impacted people's ability to be like, oh yeah, he, like, that's cool that you can say X, Y, and Z and not be a turn off to this type of woman.
Wow.
I think it's something that we probably don't acknowledge enough, that it's women that are kind of actually leading most of the like our desires of women is what actually is leading a lot of our behaviors.
Right?
And yeah, it's like we're or for some of us, obviously some of us desire something else, but in terms of like on a evolutionary biological scale, it's like our desires to reproduce, and our desires to reproduce with particular people drives a lot of our behaviors. And we think we'll be accepted by certain areas, certain communities, and when we don't have high desirability, we're willing to do a bunch of other things to get it in other places that it might not be great. So yeah, sorry for the tangent.
No, that's good. And we'll definitely get into some of that stuff too. I pick up from what you were saying, we got into kind of the politics sort of arena quite early in the piece. I wasn't expecting us to get into that till later. So I want to ask, from what I understand, and like I said, this is the first time that we're speaking to each other. I'm going to go out on a limb here, bro, and say that you don't vote or you don't participate in that system, or am I like where you're at with that?
Well, yeah. So I did do a statement recently where the last cycle where I was like, listen, if you don't want to vote, you don't want to participate, you can gift your vote to another person who does play that game. Because, it's like, I actually don't play that game. So I'm torn, because there's a part of me that thinks that we should actually, like, we should stop playing this game completely and just be like, listen, we're not doing this. I'm not doing this again. I'm not engaging again. Like, let's literally recreate it. But I don't know if we're actually there yet. And if we've created an alternative space for things to exist, because I do think I think that's where we should be heading, but I don't, and again, should, I say that very loosely. But so I had this idea where it's like, listen, maybe, if you're not really interested in participating, gift it to somebody who you think is intelligent and is paying attention and does believe in the system or whatever, like gift it, whatever, just, go for it. I don't know. I personally didn't even do that. And it was just purely because I wasn't even in the country when this whole thing, like when everything was going down. I was like, I'm not playing this game. I'm not. But that's pretty much, I think that's still my take on it. And I am very torn, because as much as I say like, yeah, gift it to someone that you care about, there's a part of me that's like, that really is on some like, yo, burn it all down. I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm like,
man, you're not there. I've spoken to a lot of people that are like that, and like I always wonder, like, what would happen. Like they always see those things on social media, especially. But I remember a time before that where it was happening. There'd be conversations like, what would happen if we all just didn't vote? What would happen if we just stopped going to the fuel station? Like all those sorts of conversations. But it seems to just stop at that would never happen, and there's kind of no.
Yeah. I mean, that is, and ironically, that is our power. Like our true power is in our collective ability to be still, not to do anything in like collectively. Like, it's not that, I don't think that we actually have the collective power to do something, like to actually go and all execute one thing. But I think the thing that we all can do is actually sit still. Because in the act of not doing, like a meditation, like there's something that truly happens in the act of not doing. And if if anybody of your listeners have not meditated or don't know what meditation is, it's really important that you take some time to literally sit still in your breath. And I mean, and I think that there's a form of protest in that actually undoes the entire system, because I don't think that we don't have a hive mentality yet where we have no leadership. So when we have no leadership, and we don't have enough individuals who act as individuals within group functions to represent leaders in order to make a conscientious decision as a collective. But the thing that we can do is absolutely do nothing and just sit still. And I think that that's a strong act of resistance that the system doesn't have an answer for. Yeah. That no system has an answer for. Right? Like, and even a perfect example of this is that your own internal confusion doesn't have an answer for when you start to sit still. Yeah. And this is real. This is a real thing. You can test it. Like you begin to sit still, and actually, fuck it. I'm going to go, like, do you mind if I go into talking about meditation?
No, for sure. I'm all about it, man. And I think more people should be doing it. So like anything that you can offer that would help people open up to that space, I'm all for it.
Okay. This is something that is really near and dear to my heart. And I think it's important because this is how people do get to that space where they're comfortable living in their truth and finding their truth and living in their truth. And I think it happens in this stillness and this quiet. So this is really important. A lot of times people think and describe meditation as, getting yourself comfortable and just emptying your mind. First and foremost, that's a bunch of bullshit. You cannot empty your mind. You cannot stop your thoughts. You can't, the idea of stopping thoughts is more thoughts, like immediately. So
I'm only laughing because honestly, before I started meditating and stuff, I would have thought that you were fucking crazy. But now that I'm doing it, like I practice, I like it, it fully resonates, but I can't help but kind of think of the old me that would have ridiculed this conversation. So sorry, that's why I burst out.
No, I mean, I want to tell people, I want to cut the bullshit out. Like I want to cut this and meditative bullshit, like people who talk like this and like, yo, that is absolute utter bullshit. They're following a script that they're wearing a mask. That's a mask that they think that they saw from some YouTube yoga video, and now they're bringing it to, and they're trying to emulate that and teach you how to meditate. That is utter bullshit. Like you wouldn't respect it in real life. You're not going to respect it. Like if you don't talk like that, don't talk like that. Here, like your meditation doesn't need to sound anything like that. Meditation is really about sitting still and letting whatever happens. Creating space for whatever happens, whatever thoughts come to flow through you. And sometimes you're going to, and this is real. This is let me think about this for a second. Here's a perfect example. You know how you want to clean your room? You might want to clean your house one day, right? Let's start with a room. It's very simple. It's like, okay, I'm going to clean my room. And you decide like, you know what? I'm going to start cleaning my room. And when you start cleaning your room, you start going through your stuff. You start going through your drawers. You're like, I don't even have this shirt. Pull your shirt out. Oh, these pants don't fit me. Throw the pants on the floor. 40 minutes into your room, cleaning your room looks worse than it looked 40 minutes ago, right? Because you said, I'm going to clean my room. An hour into your room is a disaster, right? You have piles of clothes over here. You got piles of clothes over there. Literally an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours into your room, you're like, yo, this is crazy. Like I've destroyed my room, right? But your room is worse than you started. Literally, your room was better off if you'd have never started cleaning it. But as you start going through this stuff and start unpacking your room and you start realizing the stuff that you have and the junk that you don't want, and like you start realizing how dirty it is under your bed and filthy, and you literally tear your room apart, you start to make space and realize, okay, I want to get rid of this. I want to get rid of this. I want to keep these. Oh, these are really nice. I didn't even know I had those. Put them back. That still got the tag on it. Like find $20 in your pocket. Like something happens in that space, and it might take you 5-6 hours, 2-3 days to clean your room. But that tornado that happened is what kickstarted all that dust up. And then you were able to start sifting through that dirt, sifting through those piles of clothes, sifting through your debris, your old sneakers, notes that you wrote, Post-its. You're like, what? Why do I have this Post-it? Oh my God, absolutely. I've been looking for, I needed that number. You know, like things start to come back into semblance and order. And when it's all said and done, you've cleaned your room. And now you can start and you have a whole clear, different space, and you've discovered a bunch of other things, right? And you've gotten rid of some stuff and let go of some stuff and learned some things about yourself and found some numbers you were looking for. Hopefully it was that girl that you wanted to talk to and couldn't find her number. You know, like that's the same thing with meditation. When you first try to meditate, I can promise you, unless you're like, you know, Osho or Sadhguru or some, you know, one of these guys, even the first time they meditate, I don't care. Everything floods in.
Yeah.
Everything floods in because this is for the first time you've given yourself space to have some thoughts that you probably should have been having anyway, but you've never given yourself the space. So it's like, well, it's a little quiet. Oh, good, it's my turn to talk. You know, like, and then all of a sudden this inner voice comes up and it's like, oh, about that thing that we said we were going to do back in, 2019. What did you want to do that? You still want, you know, like there's a bunch of shit's going to come up. It's like cleaning your room. You got to let that happen. You let that happen. So the first time that you meditate, you might not have any quiet time. You might be like, yo, I wasn't quiet in my thoughts at all. Cool. The second time, you might not have any quiet time. And then for 1 second, 2 seconds, there's a breath where you just literally feel yourself inhale, exhale, or whatever your practice is. And there was a stillness and an emptiness. And you in that moment, you realize I unpacked some stuff from the first time, from the day before, because now there's a moment in there. And then the next time you go meditate, that moment is a little bit longer because you've given some space for stuff to unpack. It's like cleaning your room. You've made some space. And the more and more you do it, the longer those moments of stillness become, and the quicker they come. You do it again, the moment is longer, the stillness is quick. It starts to happen very, very quickly, and you start to realize, holy shit, I've cleaned my room. You know, I've made some space in my room. But don't let this idea that it has to be empty thought and think of nothing, or you know, empty your mind and do no. You'll never be able to do that. Don't even try to do that. Literally let the fucking avalanche come. Let the whole thing humble and crush you, because you're going to realize in that it was going to come anyway. And it's better that you made space for it to come than for it to come than for it to happen when you're at your most anxious, or when your wife is pregnant, or your husband is, you know, is got the whatever he's going through, you know, and when the anxiety is high, the kids are, you know, got practice and got to go to school, and, you know, the bills are coming in and all this stuff. And then the avalanche, boom, comes on you. That's when you don't want it to happen. So make space for it to happen, because you can shake it off, but it's easier to shake off when you start making the space for it than it is when you're in the middle of life, you know? And so that's my like my plug for meditation. Yeah, it's super important. And I mean, obviously, I don't know if anybody who listens to you even knows who I am or whatever, but I had a whole meditation program and breathwork program with some of my friends and brothers in LA, Los Angeles, and it was a really well received one. I still am big on it, and breathwork and meditation truly is life-changing, and it could possibly save, you know, some lives.
Absolutely. I love how you addressed like a few of those common misconceptions, that you got to be still and you got to be zen and all those sorts of things. I know that is what a lot of people, they think they fail when they first try it. They're like, wow, I did it and that didn't work, so I can't do meditation. Like anything else, any other skill, it's a process. It takes a bit of building resilience. You got to go through stuff. But yeah, definitely. I think a game changer for me with meditation was when I realized that there's no right or wrong. There just is. Everyone can do their own thing in their own way. Like even with thoughts, there's kind of no right or wrong thoughts. There's just thoughts. And you know, the way that you described it, like cleaning a room, that's perfect, because the first time you do it, it's a fucking mess. Like
oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's what kind of why I, want to always let people know, because I've had people tell me, "Oh, actually, I don't like to meditate. It gives me anxiety." Like that, I've heard that people say, like, have ultimately said that to me, like, "Yo, I don't like to meditate because it gives me anxiety," and I'm like, okay, let's unpack that, because the truth of it is that what's giving you anxiety is all these thoughts that are flooding into this empty space that you've allowed for. You know, like you've sat still, and being still and quiet gives thoughts like, oh shit, perfect, this is our time. Like, and it's just charge into your brain, you know, like, and they just rush into your head, and then now you become anxious with it. And I try to say, like, listen, actually, that's the unpacking of anxiety. It's not anxiety. That is how you get through the anxiety, by actually letting those thoughts come, but not holding them. Don't, sometimes you grab one and you start unpacking it, and you're like, okay, cool. Actually, I'm really glad that I thought of, held on to that. And that meditation for then was actually you developing an idea into something else. This, I don't know. It's something that I really have seen a lot of people try to like sell this idea of like, and meditation and like going into the void and being emptiness. And I'm like, man, listen, I literally have traveled all over the world. I've stayed in Buddhist monasteries. I've sat in jungles in Brazil with shamans and monks and Buddhist monks and Taoist monks. I mean, I literally have traveled the whole world on this spiritual journey of mine, and this life journey, and always been interested in this. And none of them have described a meditative spiritual space like that, as this emptiness, the void. I will say, in plant medicines, people have visited the void, and a lot of strong breath work, you get into the void. But that's not the type of meditation that when you're sitting, on your couch, or just practicing on the floor. So anyone that's telling you that that's where you need to go, and you need to go into complete, silence of the mind, that's not real chill. Yeah. Just, I mean, also, it's not even, I wouldn't even say that's like, I think that's not even really helpful. And I would question that person who's telling you that. Like, I would say, like, I don't know if they've ever, like, if they've ever really meditated, because I don't know. I've been on this journey for some time, and I have not ever, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I've just never met anyone that's how they've described it.
I almost feel bad sometimes, because friends will say to me that they try to give it a go, or people that I know that, like, hey, we heard that you meditate, like, what can you offer me, or whatever. I always premise it with, be prepared to face your shit. and that like kind of puts people off. They're like, bro, you're scaring people off. I was like, well, if they're not ready, they're not ready. But I just want them to know, like, and I remember, like, when I first gave it a go, like, so I kind of just said to myself, look, let's just do 30 seconds a day and add on to that each day, right? So like 30 seconds of even if you struggle, and even if your eyes are open, if you're not, just 30 seconds a day, and let's just add on 30 seconds every day and just go from there. And man, like we've described, I had battles with all sorts of inner thoughts, things I was left alone with to like actually contemplate and reflect on. The things that come up is crazy. Like, you can't anticipate, like, you might think you're going to anticipate, and like, oh, well, this might come up, that might come up. Some shit that you didn't think is going to come up is going to come up. So like at the time when I first got involved with it, what actually made me get involved with it is that my relationship was breaking up. This was like a good 10 years ago. My relationship at the time was falling apart, and I was things weren't going great at work. So I was just like, well, it's about time I give a bit of mindfulness a go, because I haven't yet. So I gave it a go. So obviously I was like, okay, things with the relationship and things with work are going to come up, because that's where I'm at. And so let's begin. So, but my messy room, let's call it that, because it was my first instance, right? When I started to declutter, had nothing to do with that. It was shit with my parents, things with my siblings, just things that I didn't even know that had affected me, which had affected me. And I remember sitting there with my eyes closed, kind of when I got into like the travel space with it, navigating through it all. And I remember my eyes like jarring open, and me going to myself, oh shit, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Like I audibly said that out loud, you know, and I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, this is definitely not what I was told this would be, or what, you know, the propaganda or whatever that's out there has you believe what meditation is. And then that's when I kind of took a step back and kind of just was, I don't know, that was my moment where I was a lot more comfortable and I could get into it. But I remember that first little moment, I was like, thought it was going to be X, and it was definitely 4325. Like it was completely
no, absolutely, man. That is super real. And you know, a lot of times relationships is what the catalyst for our necessity to be still is, you know, how we relate to another, how we relate to the world. But I think one of the reasons that when you start to reflect on a relationship, the relationship itself isn't actually what comes up, is because we have this, at least for me, what I like to describe it as, like, I don't really think that relationships are the way that we've come to describe them and come to understand them. I genuinely believe that a relationship is actually between if I'm in a relationship, I'm really in a relationship with myself in the presence of another. And how I relate to myself ends up being how I show up in the presence of another person. So and how I show not only in the presence, but for that other person as well, you know? So a lot of the shortcomings of me as a man in any of my relationships actually have nothing to do with that particular relationship.
Yeah.
It has to do with my development throughout the time that is, you know, like the time before I got here into this relationship.
And it's almost nothing to do with the other person, right? It's all just.
Oh no, I mean, they're actually an innocent bystander. Like
you and what you've got going on with yourself and how that plays out to the reality.
Even to how it plays out to the reality of the relationship that I chose to be in. So this person, you know, is a manifestation of myself. I created this scenario, and we're all in co-creation constantly, you know, and understanding that if I were, maybe this relationship is toxic, but if I were a healthier person, I never would even be in this relation. I would never even be in a toxic relationship. So it's not even about this relationship being toxic. It's about all this toxicity within me prior to me even finding this relationship to be toxic within. I'm not even supposed to be here. Right? Like it's got nothing to do with you. I'm actually not even supposed to be here, but I never dealt with all of this shit behind me to realize that I'm not supposed to be here. And here I am, you know, and now like, look at me, here I am, you know? And so I think that that's the beauty of, you know, meditation, self-reflection. I don't, you know, and again, I'm leery of even the catchphrases, because I don't want to relegate it to like this sort of new era crystal wearing, you know, light pink Instagram like profile pic, like, you know, like these neutral Instagram profile pics. I don't want that to even be the case. Like I want people to realize, like, yo, nah, thugs can meditate too. You know, like you could be a, as a matter of fact, like a real gangster is going to self-reflect, because like the real ones, nothing's more gangster than actual self-reflection. Nothing's more gangster than the spirit world. And taking some time to sit with it and sit with yourself, because you'll be you'll be a real bad motherfucker, like for real, when you can sit with yourself and see your shit and make your decisions based on your truth. And I don't care what those decisions are. I'm not saying that I'm not saying to stop banging. I'm not saying to stop, you know, doing anything. I don't care what it is. But when you can sit with yourself and you can know your why, and you can see your why, and it can be clearly yours, there's going to be power in all your moves from here on out, because they're going to be with intention.
And I think, like, if I cycle back to the very first, like the very beginning of our conversation, bro, where we spoke about like what you admired in Jordan, and you saw like him moving in a way that others weren't moving in terms of self-confidence and things like that. I think therein lays a lot, like that's a primary example sort of, right, of like what sitting with oneself and kind of having that self-critique can kind of do. Because like you mentioned the word like real G's, like real G's at the end of the day, they know that real G's, you only have yourself to rely on or yourself to come back to, and you only get to know how you're going to react and who you are by having those still moments and not being distracted by phones, girls, alcohol, all that sort of stuff. Not saying that you should not partake in those things. Everyone to their own. Once again, that should, I like your perceptions of that word should. I'm going to start adopting that philosophy. But all I'm saying is that, yeah, when you, like you say, a real G, that ability to self-reflect and self-analyze and understand how you'll react in certain situations, that is almost it's a byproduct of one of the many gifts that meditation can give us, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, and there's you talk to any athlete, high level performer, dancer, singer, they'll talk to you about when they were in that zone, and that zone is a meditative state for them as well, right? Like maybe it was in a rehearsal, a 12-hour rehearsal. I remember I got a chance to watch one of Beyonce's rehearsals, tour rehearsals, and it was like 18 hours. It was just crazy the amount of time that she was putting in. And I was like, oh, I this tour is going to be incredible. I can there's no way that you can be this focused. And I could tell that they're like, yo, I could tell when she was in the zone, like moving in and out of the zone, because I'm like, you can't do this at this pace and not be, connected in a different way, because if you can't, you know what I'm saying? Like you can't really be actively cognitively doing this. You have to find that performer's high, that runner's high. You have to get into that flow state. Yeah.
Ooh.
And it's like, so I remember 2 times. One time I got a chance to see her in rehearsals, and then I saw another time when she was working on a video, and she was dancing on like a box. Not that she was dancing on something that was layered. It was like multiple boxes, like multiple levels of stages. And she was at the top part. And as she was dancing, she had slipped off, and she literally hit like, boom, hit one, fell down and hit another one, and literally hopped back up and climbed back up and was like, let's go, run it back. And I was like, no, like everybody was like, like going towards to like check on. And she was just like in it, like, no, let's go. And I'm like, yo, I come from high level, like my background is sports. I have really high level athletes and high levels and like performance athletes, high level sports. My brother was in the NFL for years. A bunch of my family in the league. My folks, my dad was my dad and my uncle were both incredible basketball players. Like I know high level performers. I understand what that is, and I'm sitting there witnessing it, and I'm like, she's in the flow state. And I say all of that to say, sometimes we use the silence as a meditation, and sometimes we use the activity as a meditation. Sometimes we use the action as a meditation. So I don't want people to think that, meditation or the space that we're trying to get from meditation is only in this like silence and stillness. We can find those moments in anything. But in this world where there's so much stimulation, I think that the silence and the stillness is a good way for us to tap, to align back in with, or check back in with ourselves, and not be, and using our breath as a guide, our literal breath, like inhaling through the nose. I'm not trying to tell people what type of meditation techniques to use, but I like the breath because it's something that's with us all the time, and it's something that we tend to take for granted and neglect. And if we can concentrate on the breath while we're in that stillness, we can use anything around us as an alarm clock to get back to our breath. That can be our pacer. We don't need to like count backwards or hold. It's just like we can conscientiously inhale, and conscientiously exhale. And if there's a car crash, if there's a car honk outside, and that takes us out, maybe that we can use that as an alarm clock. Oh, go back to the breath. Conscious inhale, conscious exhale, conscious inhale, conscious exhale. And then our thoughts will come back and something might bring us off. And that's a chance for us, another alarm clock, bing, 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 bring us back to the breath. You'll start to find those moments, or will be those moments where you're with your breath will start to stretch and be longer. And those are those moments where you're in meditation, you're in your silence, your BPMs are dropping, and you're really actually becoming still. So I wanted to get that in there. Use your breath as your guide.
You mentioned like a lot of family and kind of high performance sports things around you, and we've talked about like meditation. So immediately my mind kind of paints a Venn diagram of the two, and then in the middle spot I find martial arts. That's just my perception of it, that meditation meets high performance. I know that martial arts is almost like it's a significant other of yours that you're absolutely in love with. Talk about that life, man, and what that brings and what values there.
I mean, that's been like, I feel like martial arts has been like my girlfriend my whole life, like, it's like that girl that you grow up with that loves you no matter what, so even if you like not really, take some time off and you move away from the town and you come back to the hometown and you're like, damn, like we still in love with each other, that's how martial arts has been for me in my whole life. Some form or another has been a part of my like development. And it is, I think that's,
take us to the start. How did that start?
Honestly, I think it started from like kung fu flicks and like Bruce Lee movies and stuff, because that, or like American Ninja or Kickboxer. So I don't know, like I think that's where like the idea of fighting as a young kid was just like something that I was really interested in. Like I liked the idea of being able to protect yourself and fight off a bunch of people, and silly, when you're little, it's like, oh, you're gonna fight 100 guys at once or whatever. But I think that was my sort of like my path started there, and led from like kung fu, wushu, Wing Chun, Jeet Kune Do, Sistema, which is a Russian martial art. Then boxing, boxing, then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when I got interested in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I instantly understood that this was very real, very primal, very effective, and super valuable. So much so that I knew that I couldn't even do it seriously at the moment that I actually was introduced to it. It was at the exact same time that my career as a artist was taking off, and I knew that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu had something in it that I was going to had a bug in it that was going to become addictive. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to, what I was going to do. And I literally said to myself, I remember this very clear. I was in college. And I remember saying like, I'm either going to be a fighter or a rock star. Like whichever path opens up first is the one that I'm going to pursue. But I know that it's going to be one of those, because I could feel the bug of jiu-jitsu and MMA. Like I could feel it latching on. I had already started on this other path, so I was further along in that path, but I knew that this is a very real thing for me. So I actually had to be mindful of that and not undo the trajectory that I was already on, because I was feeling this thing here. And I knew, I said to myself very, very truthfully and clearly, like, I can be a martial artist for the rest of my life. Like there's going to be a very short window in which I can be a like touring, performing professional, like, artist in the music game. That was real for me. So, the tours opened up and I just started going on tours. But it was funny because anywhere that I would go on tour, I would just like go into like the MMA gyms or the jiu-jitsu gyms, or just like keep a little bit of like my training alive and hang out with the bouncers. I always, no matter where I went, I would always talk to the bouncers and find out what gyms that they trained at and like get there. And at the same time that I was doing that, my brother was playing football at Notre Dame. So I didn't want him to get just like too far ahead of like, like me in terms of like his strength in sports and skills and athleticism. So I still had to be training, because I was like, nah, I can't let my little brother just like snuff me out.
Yeah.
I gotta be ready for when he comes home from college and is a monster, and there was no real preparing for that. But
well, you also mentioned as well, like you mentioned like traveling through Brazil and things like that, as we were talking about meditation. It sounds like, was that like some of the places that you mentioned, was that like a journey that was taken with spirituality in mind, or not?
I think, well, yeah, the thing is, I've been doing this. How do I say this? So, I was young. I used to spend a lot of time in the woods. I was really on my, like, building forts in the woods, being on some, like, I'm a Native American living in the woods. And like, I was just like into being in the woods. I was into being in nature, into like hiking, spending, like camping. That's very much a part of my journey and my narrative. Very different from my brothers. It was just like my brother was present to it, but it wasn't his thing in the same way. Sports very much was my brother's thing. And I was always basically pretending that I was a Native American, like lost Indian in the woods, lost Native in the woods, or a like Shaolin monk. As a very young, that was like I was like pretending, like I was hoping that's like sitting in meditative positions in the woods as a little kid, hoping that someone would see me and be like, what is that kid doing? He's so weird. I remember that thought being like, I hope someone sees me like I'm being my Shaolin monk. But the funny thing is, when you pretend to sit still in the woods in meditation, you end up sitting still in the woods in meditation. Like you can't, it's a weird thing about like that fake it till you make it shit is actually real. You start experiencing the woods in a different way. You start experiencing yourself in a different way. So I've always had a very strong sense of spirituality since I was a very little kid, because my connection to nature, I wanted to be like the guy that could get lost in the woods and could always come home and could always find out. Like I was into that. I was into like, I would do dumb shit like make food and dry it out and then put it in Ziploc bags and then go bury it in the woods someplace, and go eat it later on. Like, that was the type of shit that I was into as a kid. So I've always kind of walked with this. And my mom is like, just, my mom is spirituality. Like, I mean, the thing about spirituality, and I want to be like really careful with this language, is that literally everything is spirituality. It's just a matter of how deeply inside yourself you're willing to look at something and how deeply inside something you're willing to go. Because you can figure out the entire universe through a blade of grass. Like there's a lot of lessons in that plastic water bottle behind me. It's just a matter of how deep do I want to go into that journey of this plastic water bottle behind me, this rainwater that I got behind me. Do I want to start to talk about all of the elements that make that up, and then the processes and how it impacts the environment? And well, what is the environment? What are timelines? How many different timelines are? We can go anywhere in anything. I genuinely believe that there is that spirituality is the all, and all is spirituality. So, you know, I don't think that you need to wear a fucking, you know, a beige tunic, or, you know, be beaded up, or have, you know, like, I like, I don't,
what did you
like,
say before about like pink crystals or some shit like that?
yeah, like you don't have, like, that's not, I think that you just have to be willing to, like you said, dive inside yourself, or dive inside something and find yourself within it, because you are it within all, and all is within you. But so my journeys have always been with myself, and as a spiritual being, as a person who is thinking and feeling and curious in that way, I've always found myself in those type of scenarios where I'm like, oh, I can go hike into this jungle and go see this tribe who does ayahuasca. I'm going to do that. Yeah. You know, like, oh, there's, okay, like I'm, you know, like I go to Tokyo and I hang out in Tokyo, and then be like, well, what's on those mountains? Like, oh, there's actually a really cool village in those mountains. Like one of the last, you know, like that's where so-and-so does such and such cooking, or makes, you know, they actually make swords over there. I'm like, I'm going over there. Like I have to go over there, you know? So same thing when I was in New Zealand. Like I was like, yo, I wanted to get I wanted to get my tattoos, but I wanted to get, like, you know, I want to get my prayers on me in a real way. And I'm like, but it needs to be real. Like I need to go see your people. And Jordan was like, yo, let's call up Hakaraya. So shout out to my brother Hakaraya. And he just beat me up in jiu-jitsu a bunch. So after getting beat up by him in jiu-jitsu, he was like, hey man, you want to come see you want to go see my tribe and my family? I'm like, absolutely. Like, yeah. And then he took us to his mountain, and it was beautiful because he literally took us to his mountain and said, this is the beautiful thing about my, you know, and spoke about his mountain, you know, and the connection, and that in and of itself was like, yo, this is like, y'all are my people. This is my family, man. Like you guys are keepers of the land, keepers of the tradition. It's really important and powerful. And I don't want you guys to take it for granted, because it's easy to do when something is really, you know, right there and close to you. It's easy to take it for granted. And trust me, as a native brother from America, it's when you don't have that, when you don't have those connections, and when you lose your language, particularly a person, listen, I'm half and half. Like as a Black person in America, we lost our language, like legitimately lost our language, lost our native tongue, lost our ability to connect with our community. And I think the languages that we were able to keep were the music and the dance and the drums, and we can find our way back home through that. We can find our way back home through the drum. We can find our way back home through the rhythm. We can find our way back home in that capacity. But we lost our tongue, and it causes deep problems. And so, like, for you brothers and sisters that are there, that actually have your culture intact, like, honor that. Do not take that shit for granted. Like, honor it, protect it, force your government to protect it. Like, whatever that means, force I don't even know, like, you guys at Parliament, or like the hive. What do you guys call it? What do you guys call your
Parliament beehive? Yeah,
the Parliament beehive. Force them to honor it and protect. Like never let those people forget whose land they're on. Like, seriously, that's because when they do forget whose land they're on, they think is theirs, and they will erase you. They will eradicate you, and they will do everything in their power to eradicate you. Do not let them forget whose land they're on. And that means that you have to remember and know whose land you're on. You know, like, you have to know your ancestors' stories. You have to know your history. You have to know your language and honor it, because there's power in that. Like, your ancestors, our ancestors did that work for us for us to tap in and be able to use our magic. And, you know, their technology and their shit is like, it's a distraction. It's cool. It's fun. But we have our own tech and our own language and our own powers and our own magic that's like legitimately straight up fucking Marvel superhero shit. Yeah. Like, we've got it. Don't forget it, you know? So I genuinely believe like New Zealand is at some point is my home. I have to find a way home, but not right now because you guys won't let me in. But but you know, at some point I'm gonna find my way home, because the spirit of that place has been so strong in calling. I mean, like my mom said it, like when I was there, she was like, how's this feel? Does it feel like home to you? I'm like, yo, this place is like, it's important.
I feel like, because I mean, obviously that was so beautiful, bro, and that was awesome. And I feel like I'm raining on a bit of a parade here, because I want to talk about, like, I don't want to say negative shit, but there's a possibility that it could run that way. And that just because we spoke a lot about spirituality, and then we started segueing into like politics, just at the end there when you mentioned the beehive and kind of reminding the government of who the actual land keepers are. Not owners of the land, right? Because, or well, me anyway, I don't believe land is owned.
No, I mean, the land owns us.
Yeah. We're the stewards, we're the kaitiaki, we look after it. So, but it feels like, from what I'm seeing, and I want to know like what your thoughts are around it, spirituality is almost running a risk of becoming politicized, sort of. Like, it seems like a lot of people, especially on social media, are like trying to politicize spirituality. And I guess an example of that for me is like diversity, right? Like, and we've talked about how we want to have diverse opinions and things like that, but it almost seems like it's kind of getting greenwashed in a way that diversity has become a bit of a buzzword, and then alternative, because of that, we're getting fake diversity. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts around those sort of things?
No, I mean, I agree. Well, first and foremost, I think that anything that is given is not actually a real win or a real victory. So if something hasn't happened as a result of it being forced, I don't even believe that it really happened. I'm going to be on, like, just in terms of me, right? Like, if you've been let out of something, jail is a perfect example. This is like, they let you out of jail, but they always can throw you right back in, right? Like, short of you abolishing the system, then the jailing system, you're always on the brink of being able to be put right back into that system. So for me, it's like, when I hear people talking about, like, you know, well, you know, we want to get we want diversity in X, Y, and Z. I'm like, so then do it. But if they grant it, then it's not diversity.
Yeah.
If it's granted, you know, like, you like, oh, we need rights. I'm like, well, if you think that if someone gives you rights, you don't have no rights. That's not rights. You know, if someone lets me pick this up, like, if someone lets me pick this up, I'm not the boss. Like, I'm not the boss of gravity because I was able to pick this up. If gravity shifted all of a sudden, right, and I can't move my hand, I'm like stuck here. I never was the boss of, like, over this. So, you know what I'm saying, over gravity. So for me, all of these things that are happening right now, they all look like, if you follow me, then you know I always say everything is a psyop, and I mean psychological operation. Like, everything is like being done specifically for something else that we're not seeing. It's like, yeah, watch this. This is what you like, right? You like this, and it's like, they're over here. They're just like stealing everything. Like, oh, I need this and I need that. But hey, check this out. You guys wanted to come in here, right? And there's like just taking. To me, I feel like everything's going, like, that's what's happening. So
I feel like for me, as someone in New Zealand watching American politics, I feel like that is what American politics is. They like make noise over here, like look over here, but really you see what's happening with First Nations people and all this sorts of thing. It's crazy. But yeah, I I shouldn't have cut you
No,
off.
it is very real. I mean, it's batshit crazy, but I would not. I mean, I look at New Zealand politics and I think the same thing though.
Yeah.
I'm like, you guys, they're tricking you with complacency. They're tricking you with, you guys don't like America. We have guns, like lots of them. Like, it's just a thing. It's not even like, it's like we have lots of guns. So America does have to do things in that way because they can't do what Australia is doing right now. Like America, it's like that can't happen in America without real violence, like real violence being. And the other problem is that the political right in America is armed and they're trained. It's not just the political right are also a lot of the military, ex-military forces there. So you can't do certain things. You can't push us and I'm not saying us, like, but you can't push Americans in a certain way. So you have to smoke and mirror them into it.
Yeah.
Because if not, out comes the guns, and then it's going to be a whole other problem. So you have to like trick Americans in, like, to me, this is what I believe, that they have to trick Americans into shit because they don't have the luxury of forcing them into it. They don't force us into certain shit. They got to like trick us into it or guilt us into it or mandate it into it. And then, and you see how that's working out. It's not like, we're like, what? We're not playing. They're not really playing those games. And then on the other side, it's very hard to find natives who it's a weird space. We're in a weird space. I don't like that they use the Navajo as like a, actually, I want to stay away from that because I don't want to speak on specific tribes. So that part we could, actually we could leave it because the truth is I don't want to speak on specific tribes because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of diversity within First Nation tribes anyway. So, but ultimately, history shows what happens when people give up their weapons and they're able to be pushed into certain things. So it is real, but I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know where I genuinely believe that, and this is just my own belief, I think that there is something that's happening in consciousness, and there's a shift where information is coming at a rapid rate. People are aligning with a lot of ideas that create consciousness shifts. We're having a conversation about meditation, and how to find how the thugs can meditate and how to find stillness, right? Like, so that is proof positive that there's a conscientious shift that's happening, because otherwise we wouldn't even be talking about it. I think that there's a shift in consciousness, and as we come out of this, as that shift of consciousness comes out of one spell, the power keepers or whoever is in, on the other side and wants to control us are trying to literally create another spell for us to fall under. And they're like, listen, well, that spell is failing. We need a new one. Well, let's give them technology and the metaverse and, and throw them into video games and the simulations. And I feel like there's a new spell that's being bound as we're coming out of one, because we're evolving, they're quickly building it, creating a new one. And anyone that studies magic or the occult or anything like that, you understand that there is no spell that could be cast that isn't co-created, that isn't accepted by the person who is under the spell. A person has to agree to the spell in order for the spell to work and hold and bind. That's in literally all spiritual traditions, occult traditions, magic traditions, ancient traditions. The moment that you want out of a spell, you can get out of the spell. It's just, and usually spells have to be casted in a way that the person accepts it. Kind of like, what was that, like True Blood, like the vampires they had to be invited in, like yeah, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of like what's going on here.
So what are some of the things that are happening that you think that are leading? Like, what are some of how does that look tangibly in what's going on right now? Like, how are people, what's being put out there to see whether it's going to be accepted or what? That's, I guess, that's the Trojan horse, so to speak. That's the thing that's being sent in to create that.
Well, I mean, I think that this idea, this dichotomous idea where it's like vax, anti-vax conversation, I think that's like a testing ground. I think that's a spell that we're putting on each other in terms of literally sort of devaluing people based on whatever their stance is. And I say that on both sides, right? Like, oh, like, you know, people think that people who got the vaccine are idiots or something. And I have been guilty of maybe not that language, but I've been guilty of undermining, you know, people's choices in certain ways. And I mean that not only just with this vaccine thing, but like across the board, like, you know, being, not being sensitive to the fact that, you know, people make the decisions that they make at the times that they make them from the space that they're at. And, you know, it's the best possible decision that they could have made in that moment. And for me to sit at a different vantage point and see things differently and then pass judgment on them, that shit is whack, you know, but I do it, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so sometimes, yeah, but I think part of it is recognizing like, okay, that shit is whack, you know, like try to get in front of it when you can, you know, and not do it and if you do it, try to undo it when you realize like, yeah, that you find yourself doing it, try to be like, yeah, don't do that, because you don't know what they got going on, you don't know their space. So I think that that's a spell. I think that we're casting this spell where we're not even seeing the nuances. Like literally we're not even allowed to have nuances in conversation.
Yeah, it's
like you cannot say, well, yeah, listen, I'm actually not anti-vax. Like I'm actually like, I could be pro-vax, but I'm definitely anti-mandate. Like, nope, can't be that. Like there has to be, you have to be one or the other, pick a side. And you're like, wait, what?
It's that black, white, and gray stuff we talked about before too, right? Like you're either going to be black or white. There's they're almost allowing no gray area to exist right now.
Yeah, it's like, wait, huh? No, I'm not saying that nobody should do anything. I mean, I actually think people should do what they want. And I think that the problem is that freedom is dangerous, right? Like, and that's part of being free. Part of being free is having to accept the danger that comes along with freedom.
Yeah,
that's part of it, right? Because you know, when you start to get, you know, you start to let your child cross the street for the first time, and you recognize that child is leaving this house, they're going to cross the street. That freedom that you're granting them, or the freedom that they're experiencing is to make a choice within themselves to do things that are dangerous. Like people don't realize like freedom is supposed to be dangerous. That's why it's freedom. If it wasn't, that if you want a safe world, we can make a safe world, but there's going to be very little choices. There's going to be very little options. There's going to be a lot of controlled movements. Like the world can be very, very safe. We can do that. That's like a very doable, achievable metric. But freedom, like in danger, is inherently built into freedom. You know, so this idea that, you know, you want the world to be safe is like, at what cost? I'm not with it. And I'm definitely not with not having nuanced conversations and not being able to say things like Nicki Minaj and say like, hey, you know, like it's okay to question things and do some research and make your own decisions based on how you feel. Like, don't feel pressured into something to do with your body. I mean, we just had a whole Me Too movement not too many years ago about people saying like pressuring people into situations based on, you know, like you and using the leverage of their job, you know, or like to get them to
Weinstein. You're talking about Weinstein, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah, Weinstein, whoever. I mean, yeah, Weinstein for sure, right? This idea of like,
I get what you're saying. Like, it's that like, why is it okay for him to like, well, sorry, we shouldn't focus too much on him, but I guess that scenario, you've got someone who's saying, you know, taking away someone else's power to put something in someone else's body. And yet here we are now kind of amongst the war with the same thing.
Right. I mean, and the argument is that, you know, like, obviously, I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't really make much sense, because the argument is that, you know, the unvaccinated, I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. The argument is that the unvaccinated pose a threat against the vaccinated. And so the unvaccinated are keeping the COVID situation around, but it's like, well, don't the unvaccinated only pose a threat to themselves? I would imagine if the vaccine works and is safe and effective, then the only people that they're posing a threat to is themselves. Otherwise, what's the point of vaccination? Like, so then again, why are we mandating people who are accepting the threat, the danger, who are saying, I accept that reality that I may catch COVID? Well, and it's like, no, but you might give me COVID. It was like, well, aren't you vaccinated from COVID? Yeah, but I can still get it. Well, then you're not vaccinated. So why? Like, so then maybe should I be worried about you? Because what kind of COVID are you giving me? I mean, now I accepted the other COVID. I was okay with the other COVID. Like, I don't know about what this new COVID is that can beat your vaccination. Like, let me think about this, because so I get, you know, like it's a silly sort of like banter back and forth. But I think the more interesting one, or not interesting, but the more important one is like, how do we deem people? How do we judge people, and how do we deem people based on the decisions that they make? Are we judging them, and are we deeming them less than us because of their choices? Because if that's the case, then we're in a really, really slippery slope. And what people don't realize is that, like, the precursor for slavery isn't like beating a person and owning a person and like getting them, you know, like making them do work for you. The precursor for slavery is desiring for and of a person something that they don't desire of or for themselves. It's not really that danger, like it's not that far along. Like the precursor for slavery is just like, I want you to do something or be something that you don't want to do or be. I'm right on the precipice of like, I'm right there on the precipice of like, I want you to do that, and now I'm going to make you do that. You know what I mean? Like the precursor for slavery is just the desire of me wanting you to do something that you don't want to do for yourself. That in and of itself is a dangerous, it's a step in a direction, and it's a dangerous step in a dangerous direction. And I'm a little bit leery and worried about that.
Since you bring up like slavery, and obviously there's relationships there to racism and stuff, I want to ask, because it's a conversation that's been happening amongst my circle a little bit lately, and that is the relationship between racism and classism. Do you think there is one, or is there like as one kind of the sub and the other was the primary? How do you see that relationship working when you think about it?
It's interesting. Well, okay. So I think classism will predate racism in a lot of ways, because you can have classism in spaces that you can't have racism, right? Because they're, you know, like you can all be the same people, and all of a sudden start, you know, some version of classism will start to exist. And there is no way for you to racially separate, segregate, or denigrate. So you find something else. You know what I mean? Like, so, but classism can exist. But I think racism has been the enforcer. I think racism has been the enforcer for classism for a very long time, particularly in America, because and I'm sure in any colonized space, that's the case. But I think racism has been the enforcer for classism, because it's like, it gives the elite or whoever is sitting at the top of the class structure, somebody to point at as to why the people underneath you aren't where we are. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, okay, if I'm going to use America for example, just because it's easy for me to break that down. It's like, if there's a massive amount of poor white people in America, right? The upper class of America can point to the other races in America and be like, well, the reason that you're actually poor is because all of those people are taking your jobs, and those people are taking your welfare money, and those people are taking your tax money, and those people. So instead of them looking at like, wait, well, how are they taking our money when you literally have 99% of the wealth? What percentage of the money are they taking if you have 99% of it?
Yeah.
Like, even if we got rid of them, where would when did that money's not going to like magically appear from the bottom? It has to come from the top, because you guys have it all. But because literally because they have something tangible to point to and be like, it's not us, it's them. The race is like, they stop looking at the top and they start looking at the bottom, or they look to the left and they look to the right, and they're like, yeah, you're right. That black person over there, or this brown person over there, or this indigenous person here. It's like, what? Nah. And I think I wrote this in one of my Instagram posts, like, you know, the only thing that America really has ever offered white people is the comfort that at least they're not black, brown, red, yellow. Like, that's the only thing America's really only offered like poor white people, because for the most part, poor white people don't get shit. But in their mind, they have this idea that, but at least we're not them. You know, like, but we're not them. So and you're kind of like this idea of like, you know, and I'm going to say this, people are going to be upset, but like, Obama for black people is the same thing as Trump for white people. And I say that wholeheartedly. I mean it. I believe it for myself. Obama was a representation of blackness that was important to black people. So they were willing to overlook all sorts of shit that he said, that he did, that he, you know, that implications, things that he, you know, manifested under his reign, because he resonated something with them that was with us, that was that we needed to see visually, tangibly, and to speak to the masses of people. And it was, he needed to be able to be Harvard trained and speak on a high level, and, you know, be articulate and good looking and cool and smooth, and at the same time could go on the corner and be like, what's up, bro? Slap fives and shoot, play basketball, you know, and rap the latest Jay-Z lyrics. And it was like, yeah, that's our guy. But that's no different really than Trump being able to be like, talk to the everyday average white person, you know, sort of, you know, literally working class white person, and speak a working class white person's language, but also be at the top of the upper echelons financially. So it's like, wow, he's kind of one of us, but with all the trappings and gifts of the American dream. So he keeps it intact.
And the access.
Right. So he's almost bringing us there in some way, shape, or form, like that. And that's the same thing that was happening to Obama, but it was on this side. You know what I mean? Like, it was like Obama was, and it's the exact same thing. They're the exact same person as far as I'm concerned, in terms of how they speak to the emotions of the people who they were galvanizing. Wasn't about what the policies were, but what they were, you know, what they represented, who they represented. I mean, Obama represents a class of individuals that literally most black people can never even, you know, aspire to in America. Yeah. Yet they will champion that. And, you know, and I get it. Listen, I've met Obama multiple times and I could see it immediately, you know, like I get it. I get why this guy is able to move how he moves. So to answer your question in long form, I think race I think race is the enforcer of classism, and I think in particular spaces. And I also think that I think that there's hierarchies that are real. I don't think that and I think when numbers get too big and there is a surplus of anything, you start to develop hierarchies of power and hierarchies of competency and dominance. I think it's really hard to be egalitarian when populations grow past a certain point. Because because it's hard to know each other. I mean, this is, especially as First Nation, as First Nation individuals and indigenous individuals, there is a history that we have that we can kind of point to and look to and make note of and remember, in terms of like egalitarian and, like you said, stewards of the land and keepers of the land and living off of the land. And part of that has to do with, there's a recognition of the vast variety of types of individuals that show up within tribes. So you do have, multi-spirited, two-spirited, individuals within tribes. And if you think about the rights that the LGBTQ plus community is fighting for, are rights in 2021 are rights that they fucking had in like 1396. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are things that existed, but they exist within a space because when you live in a tribe or in a smaller unit, it's much easier for people to be accepting of a whole bunch of things in a small setting, because one, when you're in a smaller setting, your numbers don't seem so as little. And also, if there's 1,500 of us in an environment, it's easy to know 1,500 people. You can really know 1,500 people, and you can know those two-spirited individuals, who their moms are. You can know who their dads are. You can know who they are.
It's relationship, right? It's
relationship is real. You have a context for them, right? Like, they're not other.
Yeah.
And
they are a part of both. They're not. Right.
They are us, and they offer. And the beauty of it is not only are they not other, and with fear, there's something mystical and magical about them, because they offer us a glimpse of balance that no one else in the tribe can offer. So there's something really literally spiritual, magical, shamanistic about this being who walks multiple paths, right? And who is able to,
with the echo chamberness of it, like the smaller the echo chamber, not to make it transactional, this makes it sound really transactional, but with the smaller number, the smaller echo chamber, more interactions happen because there's less people. And so interactions equals stronger relationship. That's essentially what a relationship is. It's an increase in interactions, whether that's quantitative or qualitative. You can have a real deep interaction or lots of mini interactions, but that's what enforces relationship, right? And I know 100%. And I know within Māoridom, so you spoke about two spirits. So in Māoridom, we have a term what's called takatapuhi, but it means the same thing. And like when you break down you'll have to correct me on this one, is it etymology? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
So etymology, and this is what I was taught. I understand people listening, you might have been taught something different, as is with tribal languages or indigenous language. There's always different variants. But what I was taught is that the etymology of takatapuhi, so taka means to like fall or like move. And then tapuhi, well, ta is like, I guess it's like it's the to and from of the movement. So it's not just traveling in one way, it's ta is to go and also to come back. And then puhi means is like a variation of the word wind. So then when you put it together, it's traveling between different winds. And so And that's like, could be like into two spirit, right? Or like,
say the word again one more time.
Takatapuhi.
Takatapui.
Awesome.
Takatapui.
And then essentially what I was taught is that before colonization, our Takatapuhi family members, they were like a lot of, a primary role that they had was relationship counseling, because they could see things from the perspective of both feminine and masculine energies, if you want to call them that. And therefore they were able to shortcut a lot of conversations or things between couples, because they could see from both angles and help provide that perspective. So yeah, like there's a lot of, you've mentioned this whole, I think the year you used was like 1396, but you're just trying to say like before, you're right, there's absolutely, they were revered and seen in a massive way. And the introduction of, I don't want to blame the church, but you can argue Western constructs come in and take those things away. And then subsequently, we're in a very, very different world, and those things aren't seen as gifts. They're seen as, something that's shameful. Hence, our family are fighting for their rights in 2021.
Yeah, no, and here's I know a lot of times I get a lot of pushback because people feel like they're uncertain as my stance regarding the trans community. And I actually, first and foremost, I don't really have a stance. I genuinely believe that people have to fight and own their space, and it can never be granted. But like I said earlier, it can never be granted by another side. It has to be earned I believe in blood, sweat, and tears. Like it has to be. You have to bleed for the things that you want. Be willing to bleed for the things that you want, because I see what happens when we don't. I see what happens, and the space that I do operate from is that, particularly in America, and I have to preface this because I only really understand American history heavily. It's the only history that I studied enough to feel confident in understanding. Movements of oppressed peoples in the histories of America have always been co-opted by the power structure and the elite, and that which was desired of from the movement never comes about, and the people end up being in a really dangerous predicament. And I say this, and I say that to say I genuinely believe that if I'm an activist of any sort, the moment the media and the government gets behind my movement, I'm immediately questioning what's going on now. Me personally, I do not think that now I've gotten the media and the government on the side of the right side of history. I don't believe that. So my issue is not with, I have no issue with trans right. I do not care what people do with themselves. As a matter of fact, I want people to be free to do whatever they want to do. Like, I want to be very, very clear about that. I am very leery of things being backed by government, big media, big corporation. I'm immediately like, whoa, guys, hey, this might not be our movement anymore. Like, we have to be mindful of whether or not this is what we actually are really talking about and working for, because there might be something, and probably something, going on behind the scenes here that they're maneuvering. A perfect example of this, so as to not just be talking shit, a perfect example of this is the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King, during the civil rights movement, really thought integration was a good idea. In his heart of hearts, he truly believed that integration was the way for white people to see Black people's humanity and people of color's humanity. He was like, if we get a chance to engage with them and they can break these color lines, they will see us for who we are wholly and what we are capable of, and how much of an asset we could be to the whole of America. Malcolm, on the other hand, his position was, let us get our shit together by ourselves, for ourselves. And when we're producing the best fucking brain surgeons, and when we're producing the best cancer research centers, and when we're producing the best teachers and the best doctors, they're going to break the color line because they need what we have. And then they'll recognize, not because we want them to see our humanity, but they have no choice but to acknowledge our greatness and humanity because we've built ourselves up. Us desiring to be with them is going to undermine us. Those were essentially the two positions. At the end of Martin Luther King's life, which no one ever talks about, never in American, they literally only show speeches from 1963, and even though he died later. At the end of Martin Luther King's life, all he talked about was the fact that he basically felt the movement was co-opted, and that he had integrated his people into a burning house, that he had fears he had made a terrible mistake. They never talk about the fact that Martin Luther King in the end of his life was really concerned with what he had just done and the integration, because what integration actually did was it removed the dollar circulation from the Black community. It took Black people going into white communities for what white communities had to offer. We were doing sit-ins at white diners. We wanted to spend our money at white stores. We wanted to ride white buses. We wanted to interact in the white community. But for every $1 that we were willing to spend in a white community, that was $1 that was being taken out of the Black community.
Yeah.
So our Black diners and our Black businesses were closing, and all that allowed for was all those white corporations and white companies and white businesses to get Black money. And now those businesses did better, and it devalued our community, literally destroyed the Black community. Like 100%, there's no arguing that. I don't care what scholars you bring me, anybody, and they'll have to agree, because we have the proof. We know the economics of it. Our money got removed from the Black community. We lost jobs, we lost teachers. Our schools got defunded because the government was funding and supporting integrated school systems. But those integrated school systems were in white communities. We were busing Black people into white communities. White kids weren't busing themselves into poor Black communities, and then that government money going to those schools. So literally the white communities were getting this new money for integration that the government was backing, that was going towards white schools that were already had money because of taxes. So, and essentially more money that was getting away from Black schools and Black community. I say all of that to say.
Was that the PSYOP?
Huh?
Was that the PSYOP?
That's the PSYOP. So they literally that was how you pulled the rug out from underneath it. And that's why they're Black schools to this day, Black communities to this day, economically suffer, financially suffer. Black communities our dollar does not circulate within the Black community. It leaves the Black community and goes right. Asian dollar circulates in the Asian community. The Jewish dollar circulates within the Jewish community. Those communities practice what's called spiderweb economics. They go out into other communities, work, offer, hire, trade, like dry cleaners, open a dry cleaners, the dry cleaners services some other community, but then they take the money from that and they bring it back to the center like a spider. So the food is out here, the spider goes, gets this food and brings it back to the center of the web. The Black communities in America do not practice spiderweb economics.
No.
Black communities in America, they work out here. They do all of their work on the fringe. Even if they do work within the community, they then go and spend the money outside of the community. So that dollar doesn't have a chance to circulate within the community. It doesn't make the community any richer and any more wealth within the community, because it starts making other communities more wealthy. And again, I say all of that to say that's how movements get hijacked and get manipulated. And you think you're marching for a cause, and you think that even a person as brilliant as Dr. Martin Luther King, who was in college at 15 or 14 years old and was, and a genius of a man, literally one of probably the great thinkers of America, can be tricked and manipulated and into something. Don't think that your little movement, your little Black Lives Matter movement, that you and your homies put together, you're smarter than fucking Dr. Martin Luther King. If Dr. Martin Luther King could be manipulated and tricked into some shit, so can you. And that's where my position is. Be very mindful of when the system, the power structure of the system starts backing your cause, because they don't care about you. They've never cared about you. Mm-hmm. And so that's the only sort of position that I really take. So it's not about, I mean, I'm very, very clear about the value of fucking multi-spirited people in the community, like within a community. And like you said, contextually, the more we know, like the more experiences we have, the more time that we share with people, the more we know who they are contextually, the less we're able to make these, like, project these silly fears onto them and then be violent against them. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, and that's their fear. Like, what the fuck? I'm like, we're still being killed. We're still being attacked. We're still being for the desire to wear what we want to wear, look how we want to look, speak how we want to speak, talk how we want to talk, date who we want to date. Yeah, that's batshit fucking crazy, right? 100%. Like, you should definitely, be safe to express yourself and be who you are. I think that in being safe to express yourself and be who you are, the first enemy you have to look out for is the power structure. That's who you have to look out for. The little, like, some idiot on your block who's, talking shit, that person, that is an anomalous individual. That's something that's, I mean, I know that unfortunately the reality is that when your numbers aren't, when people don't have interactions with you and your numbers aren't strong, it's like that reality is real, and that threat is real as well. But I think in terms of the movement, we have to be really, really careful about what happens when things become popular or mass publicized by, like, government, big media, big
state endorsed, so to speak.
Yeah. I wouldn't trust it. That's all.
Well, we've danced around music a little bit here. So I want to ask, are you a hip hop fan?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in it. I gotta be.
Yeah. Oh, you mean you just want to ask, right? Because otherwise, if you weren't, well, then my next question wouldn't make sense. And this is a completely selfish question. This is for me because it's something that I get hit with a lot, and I don't really have an answer. I haven't really, it's not a conversation I've had out loud with another individual yet. But I do wonder kind of where you're at with that. And to be honest, I'm probably making this to be a bigger deal than it needs to be. But with the misogyny that exists within hip hop, how do you kind of reconcile that? Or do you even?
I mean, I don't think you can. I think the psyop in hip hop is real. Like that was a plan too, right? Like the financing of an NWA, whether they want to admit it or not, the financing of an NWA at a time when Chuck D, Public Enemy, and the Rakims of the world and the Big Daddy Kanes and these type of individuals who are lit, especially in New York from the East Coast, is like big giant African medallions and people calling themselves gods and practicing, and following the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X, like being a big, and then all of a sudden this massive movement of gangster rap comes out of the West Coast, where literally, like, it's like the total opposite. Not that that's not real. That is definitely a real element of the Black experience in America. But again, when big money gets behind it, big media, big government, and like all of a sudden there's a push behind this thing, and it's kind of everywhere and cool and all this shit. It's like the wave is kind of undeniable and is real, and there is no way to really reconcile that. It's like we have to at some point acknowledge that we want to tell a different story. And if we don't want to tell a different story, then we have to acknowledge that this is the story we want to tell. So this is the life that we're going to continue to experience until we start telling another story, you know. And because as much as you think that art imitates life, like art is really writing life as much as life is writing art. We're deeply connected and bound by these spells that we cast on ourselves, you know, and they're real. And some of them I love, like, you know, like some of these, but it takes a, you know, I also recognize, like I said, I have to be still and unpack a lot of stuff and see where things come from. I'm like a big, I don't know, like what you guys are listening to out there. And, but right now there's a group of guys out of Buffalo, New York, called Griselda. And it's like West Side Gun, Conway, the Machine, and Benny the Butcher, and some of their crew. Was it Steve's? What's his name? The Stove God Cooks. It's a crazy name, Stove God Cooks. But they're like, it's like high level drug dealer, gangster noir, luxury rap. And it's very like, it feels very late 90s Wu-Tang-esque to me. And I love it dearly. Like my favorite song on DMX's, you know, rest in peace, DMX's album is the one with, you know, Griselda with West Side Gun in them. And West Side opens the whole song up where he says $80,000 home, $80,000 $1 million neck. And I think that that's a hilarious statement, but I've witnessed that type of shit where someone will be like in a trap house, or they'll be living in like a $80,000 house, like an $80,000 crib, but they'll have $1 million on their neck. It's like, that's some real hood gangster shit that I've, like, you know, that I'm familiar with. And I like that a person was able to capture that visual image in a linguistic articulation, you know, like there's something really magical about that too, you know, like, so it's like, it's almost like you're in this bind, like I said earlier, you can't really be, there's no spell that can be casted that you don't want to be under, you know, like that. I mean, if you don't want to be under it, then the spell's not going to work. So there's a part of me that is like, I know that there's a part of this spell that I like being under, you know, when I hear these type of lyrics, they're fucking, like, it is what it is. I know those kids. I grew up with a bunch of guys like that, you know? And so I appreciate that aspect of it. And I also appreciate that they're not doing what seems to be popular right now, and they're doing it well, and it is catching fire and taking, you know, and people are responding. So I fuck with that, and I respect that from them. But again, I don't think you can reconcile the misogyny or the violence, and I think we have to be honest with that. Like, we're gonna suffer for a while if we keep that up, you know.
Right, and second to last, I'm going to see if it'll let me do this with you real quick. This is kind of, I guess, what like started our interactions was this post that you put up that, like, it struck me, but I couldn't really articulate why it struck me. No, it's not letting me do it. So I'll read it to you, because then what happened was I reshared the post. And then you like messaged me because you saw the reshare, and you said, hey, if you want me to elaborate on this, I'll come on your podcast. And then that was like, to me, that was like, yeah, we're on. So I'll read it to you. I wanted to show it to you. I wanted to show it here while we're doing it, but my computer's not being cool, and it's not letting me do it. So I can't.
Oh, you can't. It won't let you screen share?
Nah, it won't let me do it with this piece. Somebody's watching. No. But it says, if things seem crazy to you, it's because you forgot we were at war. If things don't seem crazy to you, it's because you never knew we were at war. The elite have always looked at the masses as a necessary burden until you are no longer necessary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, oh man, that's real. Yeah. So I guess like debate, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory from the first half of it, right? Like this, people tend to think that, because we're, 300 years removed from colonization, that somehow or another we're not under the same conflicts and same war that was waged against us when the ships first arrived. And it's like, no, we are in our ancestors fought those battles. We're fighting our battles of the same war. It's an ongoing war that has never stopped, and just because the nature of the battle changed, or the terrain of the battle changed, or the weapons of the battle changed, doesn't mean that the war isn't still going on.
Yeah.
Like in especially when you're talking about the elites and the masses, because the elites haven't really changed. Like who the elites are and who they've been serving, and who the wealthy has been serving, and who and so on and so forth, and who we've been serving, have pretty much still stayed the same, right? So we're still serving. I mean, the Vatican still owns a ton of all the land. They still own a ton of all the gold and the works. The Queen, and that owns probably the second most amount of land in the world, and the royal family. Obviously, the aristocrats of America, who were sort of like these what was the Baron robbers, and the Rockefellers and those individuals, the DuPonts and whatever the fuck those other, like these people they're still in power, right? These wars have never really stopped being fought. They're just different wars, and sometimes they've gone quiet. And when they go quiet, then it means that they're fighting using silent weapons. The weapons are quieter, but they're all the same. It's the same overall war. It's a war for your consciousness. It's a war for your soul. It's a war for your land ownership. And your consciousness is the main thing, because consciousness is the currency of the universe. And it binds everything together. So because money itself is never enough. I think they said Gaddafi had something like $86 billion. $86 billion is supposed to stop you from, that's enough money to stop you from dying in the street. Supposedly. It should insulate you from that. But he died in the street with a stick up his ass. You know what I'm saying? And that lets you know that money ain't it. There is no real access. When you get to $500 million, you have $500 million. There's no new real access that you have that someone who has $4 billion or $5 billion or $10 billion or $100 billion in Jeff Bezos, Jeff Bezos doesn't really have much more access. They only make certain planes. They only make certain yachts. They only make certain foods. They only make certain. So you're still eating at the same restaurants. So you're eating at the same restaurants. You're flying on the same planes. You're going to the same parties. You're going to money isn't actually it. It's consciousness. Consciousness is the thing that's super valuable, because when you can control consciousness, then you're on a whole other level. And I had a friend, actually, I'm going to leave her unnamed for a second, but she's of one of those families, super duper wealthy. And I remember sort of asking her yo, what is it like? What's it like, to have that type of wealth? And she was like, I don't really know. She's like, I know that I've never thought about money. That's never been a thought in my mind ever. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And she's like, and I think that it's probably a good thing, because it's freed me to collect people in a different way. Because I only am interested in people's ideas and expressions of themselves. So because there's nobody that can really help me. She's like, so I don't need to like look at people for what they can offer me or what they can bring me. I literally only look at them in terms of like, she's like, I'm friends with you because I think your mind is incredible. She's like, but you're not going to help me like get anything. She's like, and I'm like, yo, that's real. Like, I'm not like, I'm not going to help you. Like, I'm going to help you have a new thought maybe, or help you think about things differently. But you're right. I'm like I'm not going to be a fucking reference on you on anything for you. Like, you know, and I thought that was interesting, but it let me know that she understood her power and her position in the world in a way that probably other people don't think about themselves. And again, like I said in that post, like sometimes we forget that we're at war, that we've always been at war. Like we're only necessary to this. We as the masses are only necessary to the extent that we're useful to the elite. But the moment we're no longer useful to the elite, is like we become a burden. And it's like, well, wait, there was a necessary burden at one point, but now it's like we already have 99% of the fucking money now. So do we need to keep figuring out how to feed them? Like, why? They're not gonna figure it out themselves. Why do we have to figure out how to get food to their town? Like, the fuck? Like, why does that fall on us? I mean, it's a question that if you were in that position, I would ask. Like, yeah, why does that have to fall on us? You can justify it when you need them to buy your food. Like if you're Purdue or some, you know, I don't know what food you guys have over there, but like if you're one of these companies that needs the masses to buy, you know, to keep buying your food. So it's like, yeah, well, we'll deliver it to you. We'll figure out transportation. Don't worry about it. We'll get it to you. But it's like, well, now we have 99% of all the money. Do we actually need them to keep buying our food? Do we need them to keep doing this stuff? We already have it all. So do we need them? To what extent do we need them? I bet you that's the conversation that's being had right now. Like, all right, well, if we have 99% of the money, do we need them to keep having like multiple babies all the time? Can we like limit it to like a season? Like they can have babies on these, you know, like that.
You reckon that's a conversation happening somewhere right now?
I mean, the reason why I think like this is because I actually think like this. Like if I were if someone put me in control of 375 million people, this is how I would be thinking. It's just, I know that about myself. I would be thinking like, wait a minute. I have to worry about 375 people. Well, we need to have less than 375 people. You ever try to be like, I don't know, you have kids?
No, I don't. No.
Okay, I don't have kids either. But I know what it's like to try to be the boss of a bunch of kids.
Oh, yeah, me too.
You're like, wait, what? Let that number of kids grow to to a crazy number and see how draconian the laws have to get. You'll be like, wait, first of all, one, I don't need to have all these kids. Like, can we split the classrooms up? I need to be like, the classroom needs to be split up. There's too many kids. Secondly, like, how am I going to trick these kids into like chilling out? Or like, what am I going to get them to do?
That shit happens, right? Like, I mean, I'm an uncle, bro. Like, I'm an uncle, and I know I definitely, like you say the word trick, I definitely do that shit. So, all right, how am I going to get the younger one to listen to me or to the older one? And you start working out all that shit for sure.
And you start you start delegating people in positions of power. Like, okay, hey, I got to go downstairs. So-and-so's in charge. And then you watch and see so-and-so start abusing their power. And you're like, whoa. Okay, see, now so-and-so's not in charge. But when you start realizing that, you're like, actually, I'm in charge and I'm doing the same shit that the elite would do. Like, I get it. Like, that's why I'm not anti-elite. My real issue is that I'm not one of them. Like, they didn't call me first. You guys are supposed to call me and consult me because I think that I would do a better job of taking the most amount of people into consideration. And I definitely would hook up my indigenous people because y'all suffered enough. I gotta help y'all. I gotta help my folks. But I definitely understand how it can get like that.
Yeah.
You know, like you're like, how power can get abused very quickly. So I don't know.
That's going to be a thought with me for a little while now. I'm going to be analyzing everything I do. Like, all right, like what, if I'm in power, how am I actually going to behave? And I'll be watching all the shit that I do and how I move.
I mean, that's one of jujitsu has really helped me understand a lot of things, right? In terms of like pressure, control, what happens when you're in a position of power, how you maintain power. We call it top position or side control or whatever. Like if you're occupying a position of power, it's very difficult to get into a position of power, and it's really difficult to maintain it. Mm-hmm. And I understand what happens, and I understand what happens when you're not in a position of power. You're at the mercy of the person that is in the position of power. So I also get why certain people would try to get to a position of power. I have this in my heart of hearts. I genuinely believe that the sheer scarcity of white people on the planet is why collectively they chase power. Because if they aren't in a position of power, they will be absorbed into the massive number of people of color, and they will cease to exist very quickly. And so I think just sheerly on a blood volume level, I think that there's an intrinsic scarcity fear internally that happened at some point in time that was like, we need to occupy a space of power. And I don't know if it was a reaction to the Moors running Western Europe for a very long time. I mean, I don't know. My point, but I mean, this is a fucking made up belief system in my head. Like it's just something that I'm thinking out loud. But I think that that's also why we're not tripping so much. Because it's like, we know how much blood volume we have. We know how big of our world family is. So it's like, I ain't worried about no power.
Blood quantum ain't really a thing to a lot of, like, you are or you aren't, right?
Yeah.
This culture's like blood quantum. We don't talk like, hey man, what percentage indigenous?
No. I mean, but I mean actual like spirit blood volume in terms of like people of color. There's just like a lot of blood volume, as a biomass. You know, like if it was not even like culturally, just like biomass. People of color, there's a lot of biomass. There's a lot of yellow biomass. There's a lot of brown biomass. There's a lot of black biomass. There's a lot of, but there actually is not a lot of white biomass. So from a scarcity principle, like if you're operating from a place of where you're recognizing that like, yo, culture matters and cultures matter, then you can start to think why like white nationalism kind of matters and makes sense, because it's like, there's not enough of us in terms of whiteness. There's not enough of us for it to not matter, for us to not put it first, because if we don't, we're going to get swallowed up.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, I used to spend a lot of time like on the internet forums and shit. And I loved, like, I read a bunch of like Malcolm and I just loved like all this history and like indigenous history and black history. And, but then I started spending time on like these forums where it was like race forums. And then I would go to like the white supremacy forums and the white nationalist forums. And it was really interesting because in the white supremacy forums, I thought that they were like dumb. I was like, these people are stupid. Like actually like stupid people. But in the white nationalist forums, I didn't feel like that. In the white nationalist forums, I actually found myself agreeing with a lot of the shit that they were saying, because what they were operating from was a scarcity principle. They were like, listen, if we do not celebrate and protect and guard our fucking culture, we will be eradicated and lose this nation, because our children are already listening to their music. They're already trying to look like them. They want to dance like them. They want to move like, and I'm like, watching it. I'll never forget this shit. I was in fucking 10th grade on a white nationalist comment. I was like, yo, they're right. It was a fucking weird, yo. It was weird. I was like, yo, they're actually right. I'm like I'm agreeing with what they're saying. Like if I'm going to say that culture matters and race matters, then I have to like look at what they're saying and be like, yo, they're right. They're going to, who's going to lose their culture first? It ain't going to be us, not you, not me, not in this world.
Yeah. Well, there's already a conversation happening amongst like, I mean, at least in my circles, you know, I'll be the only brown dude in the room. And they're already talking about how as white people, they don't feel like they have any culture. They've just gone out in the world and conquered and taken cultures from other places, but themselves, they don't have any. So I definitely understand, and that's just their perspective. I understand that like there's other people that would think different. I get that. And, you know, I even argue things like when you talk about, because what I always trip out when a lot of white people will talk about, like, they won't talk about being Scottish or being Dutch. They talk about being white. Like that's the terminology they use.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and
that's actually really sad because I have Celtic, Celtic ancestry in me, and I actually really, when I look back and study the Celtic traditions, I'm like, these are native traditions. These are indigenous traditions. All indigenous people all over the world. I do not, and that indigenous, that doesn't mean fucking like of the land. Not like indigenous of the land, like off the land. They all have the same practices. They all have animal worshiping. They all have nature worshiping. They all have origin stories that tie, you know, the skies to the earth and the earth back to the skies, and children of both sections, children of the sky, children of the earth. Literally all over the world, they have these same stories and these same narratives. And it's like, it's very sad when white people feel that they have no culture. And I think like that's why they are so quick to grab onto that like crystal and go do ayahuasca in Peru and go fucking, you know, like go to yoga and do Paramahansa Yogananda and read fucking like, and they like trying to find themselves through that. And I'm like, yo, it's because you've been told that you've been made to believe that, and Christianity did this to them. This is one of those things where, you know, like the oppressor always ends up oppressing themselves just as much as those who they oppress, you know, like patriarchy has done as much damage to men as it has to women. Like we are damaged as a result of patriarchy, you know, like these are these things that these oppressive regimes, like they put unrealistic expectations on men to do things and be things that it's like, wait, who the fuck said that we got to do that and be that? But it's like patriarchy, and like, so patriarchy is damaging, these systems are damaging. Christianity eradicated these people's narratives. The first people that were colonized were fucking Europeans. They colonized themselves first and then took that fucking show on the road.
Yeah.
Like you know what I'm saying? Like they mastered that shit at home. So the people that have been colonized the longest, who are under who have been under the thumb of colonization longer than anybody else, are fucking Europeans. Indigenous Europeans have been under the thumb of colonization longer than anybody. So when they say we're white, that speaks volumes to how far along, how oppressed and how colonized they truly are, because they forgot. They forgot that their Irish Celtic traditions, their Scottish Celtic traditions. They forgot their Norwegian, Nordic fucking traditions. Like they forgot that you guys are bad motherfuckers. You got fairies and fucking Thor and lightning and shit. Thunder, fucking, you know, Valhalla. You literally couldn't even get into Valhalla without dying on a battlefield. It's like, yo, I have to die out there. These motherfuckers are bad motherfuckers. Like y'all got your own shit. You don't need to come talk about your fucking spirit animal from like our indigenous culture. And you don't need to fucking talk, you know, go to your ayahuasca. You got mushrooms that grew in you got plant medicines and spirit medicines that grew in your culture. You have a tie, you have a lineage. You have to be comfortable with going back there. Unfortunately, what they don't realize is that Christianity erased that shit from them. And it's like I said about patriarchy. Patriarchy. It oppresses men just as much as it oppresses us, and colonization oppressed white people just as much as it oppresses fucking us, you know, like, so they feel lost.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right, man. It's sad. Like, I when these conversations started happening, I was just like, fuck, I never knew you felt like that. Like, to feel like you've got no sense of culture and you don't belong anywhere. That's crazy, because I think that's me personally. I know that's something that's always given me a lot of confidence going out into the world, is that no matter what goes on, no matter how much I fuck up, no matter the things I might say to piss people off, or, you know, whatever I might do, I always know where our land is. I always know where I can come back to. That is like my father's land, my grandfather's land, my grandfather's grandfather, where our canoes, where our waka turned up and landed in New Zealand. I know where that spot's at, and I know where I can call home. So you can bash me around and hit me with whatever, but I like, it's like a video game, right? Like, I've got a checkpoint saved here, so I can go out and do whatever I want, because I know I'm coming back to this checkpoint at a bare minimum, and I love that checkpoint. And then yeah, I guess some people in the world, that other world, they feel like they don't have that, or they don't have that. So yeah, I empathize wholeheartedly.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of the healing of the world that we can offer. You know, we can actually heal them in helping them to understand that they do have it, and that it's their job to actually dismantle. It's not really our job to dismantle patriarchy in that capacity. They can actually dismantle it for us, because it's keeping them under the grip. They're the ones that are actually under the grip of patriarchy, even more so than us. Patriarchy, I'm sorry, under the colonization. Men are the ones that are under the grip of patriarchy, especially what would be considered like the alpha men. We're the ones that are really suffering under fucking patriarchy, because it doesn't allow us to be our full selves. It keeps us confined to these ideas that are just so small and so limited. And then it's like we don't even get a chance to experience women at their fullest. So it's like, so we're actually losing. We're losing our opportunity to connect to our higher self and our higher and through women. And white people are losing their opportunity to connect to their higher selves, because they're under the thumb of fucking colonization just as much as we are. At least we can look at each other and recognize it. Like, we know what it is. We can see it. They can't even see it. And they're literally, like you said, they're literally saying, we're lost. We don't even know who we are. Like, we're just white. White, blank, white, nothing. That's like, that's not okay, man. Like, no, you're not. You have a deep, rich history, and yeah, some fucked up shit happened, and you probably did some fucked up shit along the way, but that's because you were hurt, like, and you were traumatized, and you did something, like, because you were colonized. They were like, you didn't. Nobody wants to get like you thought that there was an opportunity on that fucking boat when they put you on that boat and put that gun in your hand. You thought there was an opportunity on the other side that was better than the one that you just came from. But the reason why it was the one that you just came from wasn't good was because of colonization. You were the first victim of colonization. You know, so they got to get back. They have to, maybe we help them find their way back through conversations like these, where we're the ones that help them recognize that, no, you have a culture. Like, maybe we stop denigrating them to cultureless. You know, if they refine their culture, maybe that's all that needs to happen, so that they can remember, like, oh shit, what? We're Native too. And that is like the bing, like, no, don't treat them, that's our brother. Don't treat them like that. You know, like, and then we don't have to do all this. Right now, they don't see us as brothers and sisters yet, because they don't know that, they just don't know.
They don't belong.
They got hard. They were far from home.
Last question, brother, I'll ask you. Man, we've had a massive conversation today. But last question I'll ask you, just because I ask every guest that comes on to answer this. And bearing in mind you're not a mental health professional or anything like that, but there's someone listening right now who's going through, a valley instead of a peak. They're at a low point. They don't know where to turn to. They're kind of feeling like they're at their wit's end. What invitation or offering would you offer to this person in this space to help them navigate that time right now?
It's interesting that you would ask that question, because I very often am vocal about the fact that I am not necessarily the one to come to in certain moments, because I am the sort of rougher spirit, like I'm the warrior spirit. I'm the one to come to, like, I'm not necessarily the one to come to for healing. I'm more so the one to come to for strengthening, you know, like, and for, and I have to, and it took me a long time to sort of realize that about myself, because I realized that I'm actually not, I'm more of a detriment in certain moments, because I'm like, nah, yo, fucking lace up. It's time to go. You got to keep pushing, you know? And it's like, nah, sometimes you don't need to keep pushing. Sometimes you need to be still, and let things heal. So it's an interesting question, because it begs me to reflect on myself a little bit, in the areas where I have some blind spots, and some shortcomings. And one of them is in empathy and sympathy. Maybe not sympathy, but sometimes I'm not as empathetic as I need to be or could be. So it's a really strong question. I think the thing that I would tell them is that they literally are stronger than they can ever imagine themselves. And any limitation that they believe that they see or feel is a limitation that they've created. And I wrote this one time on one of my things, like, I've never met a limitation that I didn't create. And I really mean that. We're constantly co-creating our experiences, even the worst of the worst. And if you're a person that believes in karma, then you have to believe that anything that you experience is part of either your karmic debt or your karmic bank account, you know, like your karmic surplus. So it's sometimes, even when we, you know, think people to be karmically free, like a baby, it's like, well, not necessarily if you believe in karma that lasts through lifetimes. We genuinely do not know. And if we look at time and it's not linear, not in a linear fashion, but time being just all over the place, sometimes you need to suffer to build your bank up. You know, so sometimes when you think that you're in the low, what you're actually doing is you're powering up for something to come, you know, for something else. And again, that these limitations, these ideas of lows and highs, everything is always balanced. And that low is a much needed moment. And if you can honor that as a much needed moment for something, you don't necessarily need to know what that something is, but if you can honor it and say, look, it's low because it's low right now because of my perception from where I'm looking, you know? But if I pull back far enough, I can see that this dip here is what is like gathering the momentum for this situation. And the farther back you pull out, the lows don't look so low and the highs don't look so high, and you keep going back and it's like, well, actually it's not really that moving at all. And then you go further back, you're like, this thing is a fucking straight line. You go further back and you're like, it's a very thin line. You go further back, there is no line at all. You know, it's like this idea, like, for perception, for us to understand something, we really need the perfect amount of time and space, right? I can describe my hand at this distance. I can tell you what it looks like. You know, you can describe my hand at this distance. You can describe it at this distance. It might be a little different. Oh, he's got a callus. He got a hole in his hand, right? But it's very hard to describe my hand from here. You know, you need time and space at a certain point to describe it as a certain thing, right? And it's like, sometimes something's just too in our face for us to describe it and see what it is. So I don't know. I guess that's what I would try to say. But I would do my best to try to be sensitive, because that's something that I'm not very good at. I'm working on it.
Awesome, my brother. That's great perspective, and I love that look. Once again, something you're going to leave me thinking about. I was excited to have our conversation, because from the bits and pieces that I had seen online, and just the time that I know that you and Jordan had shared together, I knew I was going to learn something. I had no idea what that was going to look like or what that might be, but I just knew that there was something to gain in terms of, there was just always going to be something to learn. There were always going to be some inner challenges. There was always going to be some thought provocation and values questioned. I knew all that stuff was going to come up, and it's been every bit of that. And I look forward to my next few weeks or months or longer, or lifetime maybe, of unpacking the.
Yeah, no, same, man. I have so much to learn from, you know, from you and your family and your tribe and your people, because it's something that my tribe is missing, my family is missing. And I do actively miss, and I could feel it. I could feel, as soon as I landed, I could feel it. Like, I mean, literally, as soon as I just seeing the visual. My girlfriend at the time was also Native. She immediately felt it as well. Like, immediately could feel like, wow, what it is like to see a woman with her traditional Native tattoo on her face greet you and be able to be who she is, like, and out loud and present and visible, and like, I see you, like, I see you. I'd say it's just a really special, amazing thing, man. And I'm very, very grateful and for that moment. And so I have so much to learn from you as well, and I'm here for it.
Cool, bro.
All of you, all of the yous.
Anything you want to say before I wrap up? Any final word, final comment?
Oh man, no, man. I guess I do have a podcast coming very soon, and which is another reason why I wanted to do this podcast, because I want to start building my community of podcasters and individuals who are you know, taking these moments to set forth intention of interviewing individuals. So I wanted to practice and, you know, and honor that and honor you guys. So the podcast is called Netic Knows Nothing. And it's basically me just exploring, hopefully, ideas and from individuals who are just more versed in those areas than I am. And hopefully I learn a lot. I mean, really, that's the basis. I just want to learn. And along that journey, I get to share learning with others. So yeah, that's what I got going on. And follow me on Instagram, or don't. I totally respect it. I get it.
Cool, bro. Well, thanks again for joining me, man. It's been awesome.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it.
And no doubt we'll be in touch.
Yeah, definitely, man. Hit me up. Let's keep the lines of communication totally open, man, and just stay in tune.